Regular meeting of the
started. The good news is, though, that the COVID numbers are getting much better. We just saw positivity levels are very low right now. But at the same token, we want to, recognize and remember those who have suffered as a result of COVID. Right now, the tally is over 597,000 deaths in the United States and over 20,000 in Michigan. So we know that a lot of people have suffered. So we'll just take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. So I will move down my agenda items, and we have retirements this month. I want to both congratulate and thank our retirees. We have Wendy Corriveau, and thank you to our retirees. I am going to now call up Maysam Ali Bazzi and Jane Mazza, the DFT president and our executive director of staff and student services, to talk about a letter of agreement that was signed and negotiated, and it's a real positive, I think, for our district, for our teachers, and some good things coming out of this letter. So I'll let them go ahead.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Good evening, President Thorpe, school board members, Dr. Malenko. Yeah, I'm very pleased to announce that we came to agreement with administration on a letter of agreement. It moves all our new teachers and incoming teachers to a level 6, or step 6 rather, which will make us very competitive with every other district in the Wayne County area. It also gives a bonus to our veteran teachers of a 3% stipend for the 2021 year, 2021-22, and 22-23 year. So that's off schedule, so it's not on a step, but is a 3% bonus. We also got 2 additional personal business days and some very much needed special ed language on class size and workload. So I'm very happy that we could come together and work out this agreement for our members. It's been just an interesting year, right? One for the history books. I must say I'm extremely proud of all our members, all our staff, actually all Dearborn employees for the work that we've done this year. We've kept education going, we've kept food service going, and no matter what obstacle was thrown in our way, the teachers and the custodians and engineers and bus drivers and secretaries and parapros, hope I didn't forget anybody, have tried their hardest to make sure that our kids were served to the very fullest. So it really is a show of appreciation to our staff, my staff, the DFT, but all of us, and I really want to thank you. And I really want to thank the board and Dr. Malenko for pushing so hard to get those vaccines for our staff back in February, March. That just turned the page for me. That was just wonderful. So thank you very much.
Good evening. On behalf of the district and the negotiating team, Mike Asali, Executive Director, Amal Al-Qadri, Director of HR, and Rob Cederlin, also Director of HR. This is a super exhilarating end to our absolutely most challenging year ever. It's with extreme excitement that we collaboratively reached this agreement to honor all of our DFT members. We are thankful that an increase in state and federal funding allowed us and gave us the opportunity to do so. It gave us an opportunity to recognize our extremely talented staff, especially our special ed, auxiliary staff, and all of the staff, DFT members throughout the district. And I echo what Jane just said regarding the entire district and our appreciation for all that they do each and every day. It's essential to express that these negotiations and this agreement is truly representative of the feedback that we've received from our instructional staff. We see you, we hear you, and we are thankful to you for all you provide to our students, our district, our community each and every day. Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
why not?
Wonderful that we have such a good working relationship with all of our members.
And we have a settled contract for 2 more years, but this was something we reached out, we wanted to do to recognize our staff. And we're going to be sitting down with the other union groups now. We generally will meet with the DFT first, and once we settle, we'll be meeting with the other groups as well. All right, I'm going to continue to move on. I appreciate the support of the board as well and the leadership for allowing this to happen. Again, thank you, Jane and DFT. Awesome. All right, so COVID, I mentioned how the positivity rate is headed in the right direction. It's below 3%. You know, even though it wasn't the main metric we were using the last several months, we still were monitoring it, and it's going in a good direction. We are still required per recommendations. Remember, we don't have a lot of our students are not yet eligible for the vaccine. So the masks are going to be used for the rest of this year. We're done in a few weeks. We will start looking to phase in and following health department guidelines once, you know, the summer comes around, where we're going to phase in allowing masks to come off when you're outside only. Inside in the rooms, we would still have them in the buildings, and then we'll monitor things as we go into the fall. We're doing the same thing with graduation. I sent out communication, and again, one thing is the guidance keeps changing as well, but we've been pretty steady. We have not rushed to judgment. We want to maintain the safety, and so during graduation, all of our students are getting tested unless they had the vaccine. They can prove they had the vaccine. They will wear masks, but since we're going to be 6-foot social distance on the field, the good thing about Dearborn is we're used to having our graduations outside, so we're ready to go with that. The only difference is we're going to have 6 feet away, and then when the students sit down, they could take their mask off because they'll be outside social distance. When they get back up in line to walk somewhere where they could be in a group, they will put the mask back on, and then they can take it off when they get their picture for recognition. And I think this is a good resolution that we came up with, where we're maintaining health and safety, and we're allowing some flexibility as we start to open up a little more. Vaccines, and I know Jane Mazza mentioned it, we also have been running multiple clinics for students. We've now had, you may recall, we initially bused students out to the DMC when it first opened up for 16+. We then also opened up a clinic at Etzel Ford. We had 3 days over there. Actually, it would have been 4 with the second dose, and that was through the Henry Ford Hospital. We then, DMC came back to Salina, so we were out at Salina. And then recently, the health department, just last week, was out at Bryant. We have one more we're scheduling at William Ford. It's going to be on the 17th of June, and therefore, we would have had a clinic for students at almost every area of the city geographically. So we're excited about that, and we will encourage, you know, parents, staff, community members, people can come. You don't just have to be a student to get vaccinated. They're willing to do anyone, and that's how they're running the clinics for anybody that would like to get the shot in the arm, and that's how we're going to get back to normal. So that will continue. The board is aware of this, and we have negotiated this with the DFT for a letter on school start times. It's something we had surveyed parents long ago. The board, we've been talking about this, and so we will have an action item at the next board meeting for the board to approve. We're recommending, and we've negotiated with the DFT, and I give credit to Mark Andrews and Tom Wall's department, because a lot of times the busing and transportation, it can be a difficult situation. It is for most districts, and I know I did send that memo, President Thorpe, that you wanted a cost, what it would cost if we only had 2 start times, and it is fairly costly, with, you know, having the ability to get bus drivers as well. So we're looking at $750 to $245 for high school, $825 to $320 for middle school, and then elementary would be $9 to $355. And it's really, for high school, it's a switch of about 30 minutes, and then for elementary, it's a change of 20 minutes. It's not a huge change, and I think it makes sense. It moves us so that high school students are not getting up and starting at 7:15. So again, that'll be on for action.
And the K-8 buildings are all going to be
Yes.
coming and going at the same time, not a staggered schedule, is that correct still?
Yes, they will be, I believe they follow the middle
The
school
middle
time.
school, yeah.
Thank you for asking that. Okay, so that is a positive as well. We also, the enrollment, we have publicized the virtual school all over. It's gone everywhere. Tomorrow is the deadline to sign up for the virtual school, the 100% virtual online for parents that are interested. And, you know, some people ask, well, why do we need to know now? It's because if we don't know now, we won't have teachers in classrooms. We have to plan. Usually we actually, when students enroll in secondary, they're already filling out their class sheets, and principals have to plan for that. So that's why we need to know how many want in there. And so right now, I believe we're just a little bit over 200 students, but I think it's growing. And so we'll continue to, we promoted it. I mean, I'm promoting in-person instruction, but I've said it here. We also know that parents, you know, it's a parent decision as to how what they want to provide for their children. If they feel safer in online, then, and for some students, online may work well for them.
I just had the conversation with the neighbor as I was leaving my house today, and
Okay.
they're waiting till tomorrow to make that final.
so-
I said, well, gotta make the decision. So it's a tough call, but
Sure.
it's an option.
And our summer school, this is going to be our largest. We're actually over 6,000 now enrolled when you include the secondary in the summer school program. This is going to be a huge program, and it's going to have a positive impact for our students. So that federal money we're putting to good use, some of the one-time money to support. We know our students need it. So, and I know some of the trustees you have mentioned that you got good feedback from the community as well. I know. So. And I want to announce that this, for the next board meeting, you'll have as an action item, it's our State Association for Athletics. Every year you have to approve that. So that'll be on the next board agenda on the 21st. That's how we usually do it, and I announced it. I have one other thing. There is a very nice adult and community education brochure that I believe all the trustees received, and they did a very nice job as our adult ed for registration, and so they have a nice pamphlet here, and they do a great job. And I know some of us were over at the graduation last week at adult ed, and we've had the early college. So that's all I have today. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Malenko on any of his items? Trustee Barry?
I don't have questions, just want to go back to the first one, letter of agreement. Dr. Malek, I want to thank you for your leadership. You made this possible. You were listening to this board. We appreciate all of our employees. In the last couple of years, we've been telling you that we appreciate our teachers. And boy, did they step up big time for our district last year. So even though the contract doesn't expire for another 2 years, the fact that you had the vision and you and your team, and thank you, President Mazza, to do this. I mean, this is a big appreciation for teachers, and then what I've been hearing is it was received very, very well positively. So thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Watts?
So I have a question about the summer school. Do we have the percentage? I know that you said 6,000 students. Do we know what percentage elementary versus secondary?
The majority, I believe it's 5,000, over 5,000 are K-8.
Okay.
So I have that, it's like 5,300, I believe, approximately. Is that rough, Miss? Yeah.
Okay, and then just the other thing, I know you had mentioned the vaccinations. I just wanted to share that Access tomorrow will be doing vaccinations from 2 to 6, and they're going to be giving out $25 gift cards to everyone who gets vaccinated in our community. And also, they're doing a bike raffle, and I think other raffles as well. And I know community members were asking where else they could get vaccinated, and I believe now that the Performing Arts Center is closed, they can get vaccinated at any of the fire stations. I believe they can also walk in, they don't need an appointment, so just additional information out there. Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments? Trustee Moser?
I'd like to also echo Trustee Barry's comments as far as the agreement, and especially that there is some language now for the special ed and capping those hours for them and rewarding them if they go over. I think that's much needed and appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would just make a couple of quick comments, echoing some things that were already said with the letter of agreement with the DFT. The board is very happy to offer additional personal days to the employees. This has been a very tough year, and we'd always wanted to make sure that we're doing what we could to support the mental, emotional health of all, and also to do what we could to try to reduce the learning loss from this. So the numbers that we're hearing for the summer school program are great. I talked to a teacher from outside the district. He said it's amazing what we're able to offer financially to our teachers compared to some of the other districts around. So a lot of things seem to be going in the right direction. You have been listening to what the board has said the priorities are for this year, and we appreciate it. Any additional comments before we move on? Next item, please.
Next item is recognition and acknowledgements, commendations.
And we have Ms. Peterson.
She fell asleep.
Being back in person is going to take some getting used to.
Disoriented.
I was looking around the room to see who was there for my next presentation. Good evening. Accommodations. Accommodations go to Thomas Hand, John Tobin, Gordon Scannell, and all of the Etzel Ford support staff that graciously worked with the Adult Education Department to accommodate the last-minute change of the outdoor graduation to an indoor event. Mr. Hand handled all the nuances with professionalism, calmness, and made sure that all necessary accommodations were made. The staff at Etzel greeted the Adult Ed Department with kindness, smiles, and a willingness to help. Accommodations to our Grounds Department for their work at Snow Elementary, assisting with the grass cutting and bush trimming. High school accommodations. Accommodations to the valedictorians and salutatorians from our high schools. Graduations run from last Saturday through this Saturday, weather permitting. Cross your fingers. Dearborn High valedictorian Selena Bazzi, salutatorian Grace Betker. Etzel Ford, valedictorian Waytone Vicky Wan, and salutatorian Scarlett DeVries. Fortson High, valedictorian Amal Taher, salutatorian Rita Mauza. Henry Ford Early College, valedictorian Yasmin Berry, salutatorian Ali Farhoud. Henry Ford Early College Advanced Manufacturing, valedictorian Elmar Dai, Rina Elmar Dai, and salutatorian Zina El Ghazi. Accommodation to the students at Dearborn High who work on the Pioneer Press. The students received 4 awards in the Michigan Interscholastic Press Association's annual Spring Awards Contest. Students receiving awards include Reem Kassir, Jad Ayoun, and Yakin Bazzi. The Pioneer Press is the monthly student newspaper produced by teacher Mike Schmidt's 4th hour journalism class. Accommodations to the Etzel Ford female athletes who performed well at regionals and advanced to the state track meet. Brianna Bates was the regional champion in the 100 and 200 meter. Bates is a 2-time regional champ in the 100 and 200. She is also committed to run track at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor next year. Reem Damley was regional champion in the 400 meter and runner-up in the 200. Kyla Lockhart was runner-up in the 100 meter hurdles. The 4-person 200 relay team finished first. The team of Brianna Bates, Lydia Marano, Reem Donnelly, and Kyla Lockhart won the event with a time of 1:46. 1:46.64. Accommodations to the Dearborn High's girls varsity soccer team who won an MHSAA district championship on Thursday with a 4-3 win over Grosse Pointe North. Yay, Pioneers. The Pioneers advanced to the regional round of play on Tuesday at 7 p.m. The team is coached by Nina Stretz. Middle school accommodations to the school administrators who helped with our recent vaccination clinics. First, accommodations to Andy Dennison and his team at Bryant for assisting with a walk-in clinic held by the Wayne County Health Department. Next, accommodations to Iman Ahmed at Salina Intermediate, who assisted in organizing the Detroit Medical Center clinic at the school. Ms. Ahmed also went out of her way to reach out to the local community, including contacting neighborhood groups and a local mosque to invite nearby residents to attend. When some questioned the vaccines, she spoke with them personally and encouraged them to come to the clinic so they could get their questions answered by the experts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Acknowledgement of donations.
Roll call.
Good evening. A donation of $1,930 has been offered to Woodworth Middle School by the Dearborn Education Foundation to be used for coding and multimedia improvement projects. A donation of $725 has been offered to DCMST by the Dearborn Education Foundation to be used for DCMST Coder 7 Virtual Robotics Competition League. A donation of $500 has been offered to Howard Elementary School by the Dearborn Education Foundation to be used for fifth grade science projects and promotion. A donation of $15,000 has been offered to Dearborn Public Schools by the Dearborn Education Foundation in partnership with Cleveland Cliffs to be used for outdoor classrooms at Salina Elementary and Salina Intermediate School. A donation of $2,000 has been offered to Salina Intermediate School by the Mr. October Foundation for Kids to be used for the STEM after-school program. A donation of learning to read resources, guided reading books, and National Geographic readers have been offered to McDonald Elementary School by Donors Choose to be used in Garam Ahmed's classroom. A donation of 80,000 reusable child-sized face coverings has been offered to Dearborn Public Schools by Wayne Risa to be used at every elementary school. A grant of $45,000 has been offered to Salina Elementary and Salina Intermediate by Children and Nature Network to be used for technical assistance for the Green School Yards project. A donation of $2,000 has been offered to Salina Elementary by Access to be used to purchase classroom supplies. A donation of $2,736 has been offered to McDonald Elementary School by Wayne Risa to be used to purchase books for classroom teachers. A donation of 151 science kits has been offered to McDonald Elementary School by Wayne Risa to be used by classroom teachers.
Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Next item is approval of minutes. Approval of minutes of the following Dearborn Board of Education meeting. Finance Committee meeting, May 10th, 2021, Board Report 20-105. Policy Committee meeting, May 10th, 2021, Board Report 20-106. Superintendent Evaluation Committee, closed May 20th, 2021, Board Report 20-107. Regular P-12 meeting, May 10th, 2021, Board Report 20-108. Make any necessary corrections and move approval of these minutes.
So moved.
So the motion was made by trustee Barry and supported by trustee D'Ambrosio. Any corrections? All right, seeing and hearing of none, I believe we would need a roll call.
Trustee Barry?
Yes.
Trustee D'Ambrosio? Trustee McDonald?
Yes.
Trustee Moses, yes. Trustee Petlishkov?
Yes.
Trustee Watts?
Yes.
President Thorpe?
Yes. Motion carries. Next item?
Special reports, Dearborn Public Schools / the City of Dearborn Student and Community Safety Agreement, Dr. Glenn Maleko, Mr. Bob Atti, Mr. John Leacher, Chief Haddad, Mr. Tim Courier.
Good evening again, everyone. So we have our full team here that will be giving this presentation. Cooperation with the Dearborn Police Department, and we appreciate the great work with Chief Haddad and all the things that he does. We have our attorney here, we have our safety and security specialist, and our technology is here. And Dave, do I just click the mouse? Is that? Or the arrow? Okay. So we always go back to our mission and our vision, students first, and this is why we're here today, to put students first. And within the strategic plan, we have the goal on school safety. School safety obviously is a huge priority. It's #1 priority in our district, and it's written into different portions of the strategic plan, and that's why we're here today. I can also mention that when we have technology and equipment available to make sure that our students are safe, we want to do that. For example, this isn't the point of this presentation today, but safety is, and you might recall years ago we brought in the AED machines. And what happened a couple years ago, remember we had, it was used and the life of a child was saved in the McCullough unit's pool, and we actually had some police officers and first responders here to recognize. So you're just another example of how we use technology to make sure our schools are safe. And I'm going to turn the next slide over to Mr. Leacher.
Thank you, Dr. Maleko. Good evening, President Thorpe, trustee members. So school safety has always been something that's been ongoing for as long as I can remember. We've done things in school like fire and tornado drills, duck and cover, stranger danger awareness, things like that, with regards to natural disasters, things that, we knew could possibly happen. In our wildest dreams, we never imagined something as horrible as Columbine could happen, but it did. In 1999, the face of security, safety and security in schools, in public schools, changed forever. We've now added active shooter training as a response to the need for heightened school security after Columbine. As you may recall, it took 47 minutes before entry to the school was made in 1999 because at that time, response by police was a tactical response, which required calling in a special unit to address active shooters. That resulted in the shooters fatally injuring 12 students, a teacher, and wounding 23 others, and then they took their own lives. That took all of 13 minutes to take place. So we had to change the way we did business, and schools had to change the way they responded to these types of events. So that required a heightened need for school security. As a result of that, most police departments now require all patrol officers to receive active shooter, commonly known as rapid response training, which enables them to make immediate entry, almost immediate entry, in an active shooter situation. So then we're good to go for a while. We think we've got everything under control, and then we have another heightened need for security to go even one step further because of Sandy Hook and Parkland shootings, which brought an even higher level of focus on school security and safety. In Sandy Hook, it was difficult to identify where the shooter was. In the Parkland shooting, a significant delay in resolving that situation was due to first responders not knowing where the shooter was. So even with new policies for rapid response training, the inability to quickly identify the location of an active shooter results and equates to more lives lost.
So, Mr. Leacher just mentioned Sandy Hook, Parkland, Columbine. Does anyone, Rigby Middle School, does that ring a bell? Anyone? During this year of COVID, we've obviously been focusing on safety in a different manner. But if you recall, just before the COVID pandemic hit, Parkland was on the minds of our students. We actually had students that were protested outside of all the high schools, student-led. So this is just recent. May 6, 2021, we had 2 students in custodian, just this last month. So these things, we hope that we never have to use the tools that are available. But what I can say to you is, as a superintendent, that's what keeps me up at night. It's a potential active shooter situation. And I think it would be a nightmare for all, so we have to be prepared just in case. We never want to use it, but we practice and we prepare. Here's some other statistics, and I won't read them all, but you can see 231 school shootings since Columbine. We have people who have gotten injured. In 2018 alone, there were 35 mass school shootings. That's when the Parkland school shooting, and a lot of us might remember where we were. We were getting a presentation here from the advanced ed in the boardroom when that was going on, because the advanced ed consultant was actually from that school district in Florida, some of you might recall. So it did hit home closely for us. And there's a couple more. Let's talk about in Michigan. Historically, and again, we want to be prepared. So we've had Bath, Michigan, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, Henry Ford College, some of you recall that. We're on the board at the time. And Central Michigan University. So these things, again, you really hope you never, ever have to use the tools you have, but you've got to be prepared because it could save the life of a child, and that's why we're here today. I want to now turn it over to Chief Haddad and mention this picture here was when we were in Washington in 2015 because of the community policing model. And if any of you go out to the schools or see any of those SRO officers, they befriend the students. They play football. They're part of the school culture. And I think that's the model that the chief has brought in and we presented in Washington. So Chief, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Maleko, Mr. President, Board. Every time I see one of these, it really is sobering for me, and I've been a cop 48 years. I can tell you that where we stand today with the request and implementation of this technology is yet one more layer. But I remember back in 2012, I served on 5 or 6 federal task forces, and I was privileged to a lot of intel. And I came back about 3 weeks before Sandy Hook, and I changed the policy where every officer on the street has to stop at a school. Did I get any pushback from that? What do you think the answer is to that? I did. 3 weeks later, we have Sandy Hook. To date, our officers visit the schools when in session between 600 and 800 times a month, depending on the month. So we've done our part to get the officers into the schools so they learn what the schools look like. I don't have to tell anybody in this room that I will use any excuse to get our officers to the schools, whether it's election day, prom night, basketball. I want our men and women to know how the schools are set up. I can tell you that we were also the very first school district in the country to have the Secret Service and ATF come in here and train our high school principals sometime in 2014. Under President Obama's It's Time to Take Action, they were the first in this school district to come. Dearborn is never disappointed when we go first. I can tell you in 2015, we went to the J. Edgar Hoover building, and I was lucky enough to sit on a panel the first day. Then they wanted to hear about the Dearborn model, and they adjusted the agenda. They put Dr. Maleko, the mayor, Imam Mardini, and others on the spot the second day. We gave about a 4-hour presentation for a global group. We didn't have to convince them that it was the right thing to do to get into schools, take care of the children. So to fast forward, we've had many exercises for active shooters in the schools. I can tell you that your principals and your administrators are ready. Mr. Leacher talked about being rapid ready on the street. I can tell you that without giving out too many family secrets, that every day we have 2 rapid ready teams on the street for every hour of the day. And every officer is, poised and trained to go in, but we have 2 dedicated teams on the street. And with this technology, we just want to be able to get into the school quickly and make sure that we eradicate any threat that's taking lives in the schools. And I would appreciate the board approving our request tonight and our agreement, because we've done everything physically that we can do to train our officers, to train the teachers, train the students, and this just puts us to a higher level. And I know that at times people will feel nervous when you mention video. It's been a long time. About 10 years ago, there was a national study that we show up on 34 videos every day and we don't even know it. We're in the video age, and it's not to be abused. It's not, to spy on people, but we are in the video age. Other people have more video than law enforcement, than the school boards, et cetera. And we just want to make sure that in the event that something does occur in a school, and the schools are still among the #1 soft targets on Homeland Security's list, by the way. So we want to just make sure that in the event something were to occur of a grave nature, that we can identify where it's at, get the right people in there, and put an end to it immediately before anyone or more people get hurt. And that's what we want to do. So, and we're here to do that. I don't want to go on too long. We've had a long-standing relationship with the schools, and during COVID, recognizing that students weren't going to get the vaccines first, we made it a point to go to every household and leave at least 10 masks at the doors of every household in Dearborn, because we realized that the students would be the most vulnerable. We also went by when time allowed, and we didn't miss any that I know of on students' birthdays, and have a few police cars go by their homes knowing that they were stressed out and locked in at the homes. And yeah, we had some 100-year-old students that we also visited too during birthdays. But again, we are committed to the safety of our schools, safety of our students, and we're going to put students first at every turn. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to let Mr. Leacher come back here.
So in the spirit of keeping our schools safe, here's what we've done. We have AEDs, as has been mentioned by Dr. Maleko, and first aid kits in all of our schools. Mr. Hummel, Scott Hummel, just revamped and redid all of the AEDs, and they are all completely up to date, and it is an outstanding program that we have done with regards to that. We have at least one staff member trained in first aid at all of our schools. This is required as a part of the crisis response team. There's a crisis response team at every single one of our schools. I will tell you, when I first came on this job and I started meeting with school principals and going over their emergency operation plans and identifying those teams, I was very, very impressed with what we've done at the building level with regard to that. We have security cameras in our high schools and at other locations. Yearly state-required fire, tornado, and lockdown drills. Our Director of Student Services, Mr. Mashur, does a phenomenal job of making sure those get done every year. We have staff training in emergency procedures, tabletop exercises with school staff and emergency management teams from the city of Dearborn. Chief Haddad has talked about active shooter training in buildings with cooperation from the Dearborn Police and Fire Departments, actual scenario drills that have been conducted. Again, prior to my arrival, something we will continue to do. Again, this is outstanding work that we have done. The program that we use is the ALICE program. It is Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. That's what the acronym stands for. This training includes a computer-based module which we've introduced this past year. With COVID, it's COVID kind of turned the world upside down. So we are looking forward to getting all of our students back, our teachers back, and implementing that training. What I heard and how I responded to that was from the staff was, you get into our buildings maybe once a year to talk to us and go over this stuff with the tabletop, but we want more, we want to know more, we want to be able to get more of this, and it's difficult to get around to buildings more than once in a year, maybe not even all the buildings once in a year. The important thing with this training is with this computer-based module is they can go back and re-educate themselves, reintroduce themselves to basic lockdown procedures and basic things that they can do in an event that would require us to employ the ALICE protocol. Just touch this. Thank you. So here's where we're headed. We're in the process of putting a new emergency notification system in. We started that project in December of 2020. It is moving right along. We have regular meetings on status with the vendors. This emergency, it's a clock that multiple clocks that are spaced out throughout the buildings that are able to scroll any message that we want, along with a audible message and a flashing signal to get the attention of everyone in the building. These are in hallways, these are in classrooms. It is a notification system that instead of tones that we need to memorize, it gives in plain terms, this is a lockdown, this is evacuation, it gives what we're supposed to do. It can also give district-wide alerts at the exact same time on a tornado a warning that we need to take shelter on. This is a phenomenal system that Mr. Addy could speak more to as far as some of the technical aspects of it. But I know that, that this is something that is not in all schools. It is something that we are kind of on the pioneering edge of and side of, and I think that, again, this is a phenomenal tool in helping to keep our students safe. We have secure entry doors requiring electronic ID access. That program is a program that I supervise and oversee. If you do not have a badge like this, you do not get into buildings. The buildings are programmed, badges are programmed per building, per access. That access changes on a fairly regular basis. I am almost daily making updates to the access to make sure that only people that need to have access to what they need to be able to get into and have access to. We've redesigned a redesign of our building entrances and reception areas. Again, a lot of this was done in the 2013 bond program, but where more schools are planned. And again, administrators are excited about this, about the ability to be able to control where people go once they gain access into our buildings. And along with that, we are looking at additional security cameras with connectivity to police and fire personnel to provide situational awareness in emergency situations. This slide gives an overview of basically the IP and analog cameras that we have in service at this time. There are probably a couple of schools, nope, I take that back, I apologize. All the schools that are listed here are where our IP cameras are and our analog cameras are. The difference between IP and analog cameras is an IP camera is something that is connected to the internet. It is something you can grant multiple people could have access to. An analog camera is on a server that's located at the building. You do not have access except at the building level. They function the same way, the ability to view what's on those cameras is what is different here. I just wanted that up there more for reference than anything else. So the current cameras in the district are at our high schools and middle schools, and they are in general areas, as listed on the slide: hallways, cafeterias, entrances, football fields, other central locations. They are not located in classrooms. We currently do not have cameras in our elementary schools. Safety and security was part, and again, you all aware of this, safety and security was part of our last bond proposal, and that is shown to be incredibly supported by our parents. So with regard to the real-time emergency video link system, we've been discussing the school district and the police department and the city relations board, city relations committee has been discussing this for years, long before I came on board here. It involves a video link of the camera feed of the Dearborn Police, which would only be used in active emergency situations. During an emergency, first responders and authorized dispatch center personnel would have access to the camera feed. With this access to the camera feed, it can reduce the amount of time it takes to identify the location of the emergency. Most mass shootings are over in a matter of a few minutes. You heard me mention earlier, Columbine was 13. The average from research I've done is 10 to 15 minutes, and the situation is completely over. Dearborn Police Department has an outstanding response time, and knowing the location of an active shooter or any other life-threatening emergency upon or prior to arrival could save many, many lives. Different types of emergencies that they could respond to could include unruly fans, a fire, or a medical emergency. And again, this would be an adequate use of this link to be able to identify, pinpoint where the emergency was taking place. And many school districts already have this technology in place. Some of those districts include Dearborn Heights, District 7, Allen Park, and many, many other school districts around the area.
And just to be clear, the police link is going to be for emergencies. So that's what we just want to put it out here. So if there's some rumors, we don't have them currently in classrooms or anything like that. We don't have any plans. This is the general areas where we would need to put them, you know, your hallways, your fields, the areas where you would want, you know, entrances, things of that nature. We don't plan to use them. The police, they wouldn't have time to be monitoring these things. Any of the cameras that we expand in the district really have nothing to do with the police. That's our decision as a school district as to why we want to do that. And we were, you know, planning for that with the bonds. So I'm going to let Mr. Courier, our district legal counsel, comment.
Good evening, Mayor Thorpe, or Board President Thorpe, Dr. Maleko, members of the board. Over a period of time, I have worked with my counterpart, Deborah Walling, who's the city attorney in Dearborn. I've known for a number of years. We both were concerned that if this doesn't work out, what's the best way to deal with it? So the agreement comes with a clause that allows either party to opt out if it's not working. Now, the agreement has been reviewed by both the city and district legal counsel. I understand that the city has approved it, and we're asking, I also recommend it as the district's legal counsel that it be approved as well. I think there's a lot of safeguards been put into this interlocal agreement to protect the privacy of the students, but also it's important to protect their safety, and this improves the response time of the police department. I was not a police officer for 48 years, but I was one for 5.5. And I know how important that is. So it is my recommendation that it be approved.
Thank you, Tim. And again, this is, you know, why are we here? It's about our students. So this is the system will help protect, you know, the community, the staff, the students, everyone in the district. And, you know, we're thankful we have such a great relationship with the Dearborn Police Department, and we will continue to partner to make sure that we maintain safety for our students. Thank you. We'll take any questions that anybody may have.
So before we start the questions, I wanted to make sure everyone knows one item is that this is not an action item for tonight's meeting. This is going to be at our next meeting, but we do have a chance to ask questions of both our legal counsel and the police department here today. So I want to make sure we're able to answer as many questions as we've got. With that, Trustee Petlicoff.
Okay, as I'm the only board member who has been present during a shooting, I was at the Henry Ford Community College at that time when they had an active shooting. One of the biggest issues at that time was they didn't have eyes inside the building, didn't know where the occurrence was taking place within the building, and it was a very unsafe environment for everyone within the building to try to gauge how to deal with the problem. There's been some mischaracterization of what people think this agreement between the city and the district is. This is not about surveilling our staff or students. It's not about spying on anybody within our buildings. It's about providing an added tool to the toolbox in the rare, and I hope never to be activated, emergency when we need to understand where that emergency is occurring and be able to get our emergency responders, be it fire or police, into the building as quickly and efficiently as possible and protect the lives of not only our staff and students, but the emergency responders, so that they can carry out the mission of taking care of the emergency, whatever it might be. This is not a live feed to the police dispatch department. They are not sitting there watching every building. We have 34 buildings. We have hundreds of classrooms. Nobody is monitoring what's going on a daily basis within those buildings, except the administrators there. I also find it disappointing that there's been some conversation that people think that we as a board do not have the best interests of our staff and students at heart, and that we're looking to create a setup to catch students or catch staff in bad acts. That's not what this contract is about. This contract is strictly for an emergency situation and would only be activated under those circumstances, and it's within our control of going forward to request that activation. It is not at the police department's end or the fire department's end. Central Dispatch would get that information only when we assess there was an emergency that would necessitate it. The other issue is that everybody sitting at this table is a parent, is a grandparent. We all have a vested interest in the safety of everyone in our buildings, and we are not looking to find a way to spy on anyone. And I find it kind of insulting that people took it to mean a contract between the police dispatch would activate that type of scenario, because that is not what this is about. I also want to make sure that they understand that it's not a live feed. We are not having the cameras running 24/7 within the police department dispatch center. That is, nobody's monitoring this. It's only going to be activated when necessary. So I just wanted to clear up some of those misconceptions that are being spread out there, and that we only have the safety of our community at heart, and we are not up to some kind of nefarious sleight of hand here to try to get into the buildings and do something else other than to help support our community.
Trustee Barry.
In the spirit of clarifying, let me clarify one thing here about, we don't want to create fear out there. Henry Ford College, I would like somebody to elaborate on that. We know what happened at Henry Ford College. There was no way possible for that to be, the outcome couldn't have been prevented, no matter how many cameras you had there, how many police officers you had there. The last, and a couple of my colleagues know this, the last person to see those two people alive was my son. And when he called me that day, within 6.5 minutes, I was near the campus. I had to go through the police to get in there. We probably had about 10, 12 cars, police cars on campus, had everything closed down. So just want to make sure.
Yeah.
It was a murder-suicide. there was absolutely nothing that could have been done to prevent that.
Oh, I didn't, yeah,
Well,
that's
well,
not
I'm
what
not
I
saying
was-
you did, I'm
yeah.
just saying, you said you were at Henry Ford, you weren't there, you were on the board when that happened.
I was on the board.
You were on
No,
the
I
board.
was at the no, I was on site at the campus
Okay,
because I
good.
heard, yeah.
Thank God you
yeah.
weren't harmed, but, yeah, I just want to, I don't want to create that, look, it happened at Henry Ford College, it could happen in Dearborn Public Schools, that's, and can't be any further from, anyway. The question for Dr. Maleko is, where did the teachers come in here? I mean, do we have a discussion with them? Were they brought on board? Did anybody talk to them? Do we plan on talking to the DFT? I mean, we just went through, you know, we started this meeting on a great note, thanking our teachers and honoring our teachers. Are they part of this equation? Because they feel, I mean, we've been hearing from teachers. Do we plan to talk to them? Do we-
Yeah, I talked to Jane Mazza about the DFT to clarify what the purpose was, because she was hearing too that it was, just like you were saying, and trustee Petlicoff, that it was gonna be used for monitoring in classrooms. We don't even have them in the classroom, so this is strictly, so I clarified for, you know, emergencies,
We do have them in cafeterias,
cafeterias, yes.
central locations, hallways.
Sure.
I mean, the people in front of me right here, there's no doubt in my mind. We're making a decision here forever and ever and ever. Police chief, nothing but the greatest respect for the man. Everybody standing here, people are gonna change. So we're saying it's never about surveillance, it's never about this or that, but who knows what happens in the future? So this is something that we have to take in consideration too, so.
And that's why we have that opt-out, 30 days.
What's that?
That's why they have the opt-out for, in 30 days. Either one of us can opt out and say, look, there's been a change in administration at the police department. We want out of the contract.
There is a lot of fear out there right now with our staff, with our community members, and I think, again, we made a, I mean, we're ready to decide this, make a decision next month on this. I think, like anything else, we have to educate people. Whatever we need to do, let them know. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind going to this meeting, I knew what I was gonna vote a month from now. But, okay, now hearing some of this information, I gotta think about it. But we need to, I mean, just to bring us back here a month from now to make a decision, I really don't think that's fair to our staff, our teachers, all of our employees, and the community. There's a lot of concerned people in the community, so I think we should slow it down a little bit, educate people, and go from there. Just my thoughts.
Trustee Watts.
So I missed, what is the name of the system that we'd be using? I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of it.
The name of the system is Sonitrol, Sonitrol.
And then are there other school districts who are also using the same system?
Yes, there are. I don't have a list of them with me, but there are other
Okay.
schools that are using it.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. I know that some parents have reached out with some concerns. So I have some questions with that. So in the presentation, it says it would be used for emergency situations. Could you list what those emergency situations would be? Because I think there's some concern as to the gray area, and I think I want to make sure that we know what those emergency situations would be outside of an active shooter.
I'll let the chief answer probably more completely, but medical emergencies, fires, disruptive crowds, of course, the active shooter, and there's probably other instances where you find somebody that's out in the parking lot that's not supposed to be there, that they flip on this, we have to activate it. We have to call the police department for them to turn it on. But those are the sort of situations. If we're calling just because we got a kid speeding in the parking lot in his car, they're not gonna put on the cameras for that.
So I think for myself, I would like to have the list of when we can use it versus when we are not using it. So if we could have the list of saying specifically in these situations, this is when we would then go ahead and give permission to the police, or we would reach out to the police to be able to activate the video. Because I think there's some, people are unsure, and I think when they're unsure, they're filling in the blanks, and I think that's what's causing some fear and some doubt. And the other thing is, on the presentation, it said unruly fans, and so I think we were discussed that you had mentioned maybe in a sporting event. Has that been a problem in the past with unruly fans?
I don't think here in Dearborn it's been a problem, but there was a famous fight between Catholic Central and Brother Rice at a hockey game last year.
Well,
That
that's
broke
hockey.
out.
I was gonna say, I've got a
Fight
hockey
broke
mom.
out in a hockey game, you know.
So then with this system as well, is there a facial recognition component to that?
I do not know that answer. I don't believe that there is.
Okay. And then the other thing would be, who would have access to the system? For instance, I know that it would be a live feed. I guess, let's take a step back. If, God forbid, if there was an active shooter at a school, what would be what would be step number 1 through step number 12?
There'd be a 911 notification, and we have dispatchers who will be trained how to access the system with approval. There'll be a supervisor on the floor that will monitor the transaction. And in real time, we would get that out to the responders going on the scene.
So then there would be a 911 phone call from the school.
As a rule, yes. It could be an officer in the building that maybe happened to be in the building and goes on the prep radio and says, I have shots fired in the school, God forbid, or something bad. But that would also go to 911, either
Okay.
by radio or phone. How about if we say that?
Okay, so it's not as if there would be a button that somebody would be able to push and not have, so it would have to be, okay, like, not a student just running by the hall pushing a
Right.
button. And then the other question that I have is, it's not currently in the classrooms. We are never planning on putting cameras in the classroom. I just want to make sure, because I'm hearing it's not in the classroom currently, and then I'm thinking people are going to say, well, does that mean we're going to put them in the classroom?
I mean, I don't know that I can ever say never. I don't know how long
Well, I
I'll
guess,
be
is
here.
it part of
My-
this plan? I guess
It
part
would
of
be a
this plan.
decision the board, we would make with the budget if we wanted to, but right now, there's no plans.
Right.
There are no plans to be putting them in classrooms, not for monitoring in classrooms.
Right,
It's-
okay.
It's centralized locations, when we had, and it really, it has nothing to do with the Dearborn Police. We've expanded. When we had vandalism a few years ago on the fields, we put them, directing them to the field for our own purpose, to monitor. So I can tell you that the principals are always asking for more, especially at the secondary buildings, because it does maintain, safety and security for the buildings, so they do use them heavily. But again, they use them without the police. This is just for our own purposes
Right.
that they're being used. I would just say this, yeah, we have a 30-day out clause, and at some point, we have to put trust, because if we get an emergency situation, we need to have that trust, and we do with the SRO officers. Honestly, I can call chief 24/7, in the evening, at night, midnight, and I can call them, and I know who to call. The SRO officers, guess what? Our principals know who to call. That is the relationship we have. It has helped us deal with so many situations since I've been in the school district. I can't say enough. Because you know who that person is, and they're part of your staff, and they're part of who you are, and they're part of your community of your school. It's just a huge positive sense of comfort. And I would imagine that was what I was hearing when we were going around the bond, when parents heard. I would hear the stories of the SRO officers playing football and doing all those things with the kids to build relationships, and that's the model. This is why I'm recommending it, because I'm your superintendent, and this is a safety issue for me. And so I don't want to regret not being here recommending something that could potentially, again, I'm going to say, Trustee Pett, I never, ever want to use this.
We don't
But I don't want to come back here and say only if I would have and have regret. And that's why, that's my only objective here. It's not for monitoring any classrooms. It's to protect teachers, it's to protect staff, it's to protect students, it's to protect everyone. That is the only motivation. And we have to do other things too. We know, we talked about the statistics with mental health and other things, so we have to do other proactive things. So this is not the only solution. There's other things that we need to do, and we know that to support our students in our community that are dealing with these issues. Because really, this system will help when there's an active situation, but we also want to take preventative measures, and I think that's where
Right.
the SRO and some of the things we're doing.
It's almost
with
like
Mr.
an
Saley.
insurance policy kind of
So,
thing, where you hope you
let's-
never have to use it, but it's there.
Well, and I think we're going
Well-
back to it's one thing if it's an active shooter.
Let's go back to having our hands up when we're ready to get to the questions.
Well, I was going to finish up. So I think it's one thing if it's an active shooter, but it's another thing if we're talking about, would we talk about like a fight? Would we be using it if we have students who are fighting in the hallway?
The Dearborn Police wouldn't be involved with that. If we have our own cameras that they're already there, we use them, we currently, just for our staff though, our principals.
And I think that's going forward. I think like if we had more specifics about when we can use it versus when we're not going to use it, I think it would make
I think.
a
I
better
think
understanding.
because every situation could potentially be different. Obviously, we had the one in the pool 2 years ago. I think the one thing that's probably has to happen, the chief said, is there's gonna be some kind of a 911 trigger. So when what do you think of 911? Emergency. So it's not just for, a couple of individuals, maybe horseplay or things like that. That's not a 911 emergency. It would be something that would have to trigger, a 911. What would we call? And I think Mr. Leacher said too, the one thing that we always fall back to, and that's why we practice and train, is because when you're in an intensive situation, adrenaline is moving and nerves, so you go back to what you know. And so you're not gonna have time to think, you just act as to what your training tells you. And I believe that's what the police do. That's why they train so heavily, so.
Trustee Moses.
Trustee Watts, you asked a lot of great questions that I had as well, but I also have a question about now, say the system is activated, do we have a way to document that the police has remoted in and checked out the camera? Because what I fear is, and what others have mentioned, is that this might be abused, that you may have potentially a police officer that may look in or go into the system without approval or without supervision, as the chief said.
And that's a great question. This is something that, the way our system is designed, we're able to see which authenticated user is able to remote in. And that way, we also have a record there to see if someone has been remoting in, if that were to happen like that. So we can always do audits to see if something has happened along those lines. But we usually, this would be something like the chief and Dr. Malego were saying, if it's a 911 emergency, there's no need for the police to just go in like that.
And that was something early on, when we started talking about this, like,
Yeah.
2 years ago, it was a provision that we wanted, that kept coming up at the City Relations Committee. And it
We
came
talked
up
about
when
that a
Mary Lane
lot.
was the chair of the committee. We discussed that heavily last year. And then obviously when COVID came, and it was under your President Barry, we put it on hold for a little while, but we sent it back to the City Relations Committee for review. But with COVID was our priority last year, so now that we're phasing back in, we wanted to bring this forward, so.
Trustee Moses, did you have any other items?
Just on the, so are we able to edit this contract before we sign off on it, obviously for next week? Or 2 weeks from
We
now?
still have the ability to amend
Yeah,
it.
we can.
So as far as specifying those emergency situations, I don't think that was clearly stated in the agreement, or it was very vague. So is there a way to have those stated in the contract as well?
We can look at that.
And
put-
as well as the thing that I mentioned about documenting whenever this is being used.
So like a list of example of emergency situation that we would use it for?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
One item I would bring up with that, though, would be this. We know that things are gonna change, and there's a
Yeah.
chance we aren't gonna catch everything the first time through, so that might not be part of the original agreement, but we've got it there as a supplement. And that way we can
I was
amend it
gonna
without
say-
having to change the whole agreement.
If you identify only these specifics and something out of that realm occurs and we want to activate it, then we've violated the contract, so to speak. You don't ever want to make it so rigid in your specifications that you've eliminated it, some other options by that. I know when I was a charter commissioner, that was one of our biggest conversations, was you have to be a little more general in some of your language when you get into these kinds of contracts, because otherwise, as times change, you've boxed yourself in to only a few specifics.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
What I want to mention is that there was even a mention of vandalism on that as far as an emergency situation. So we really need to define what an emergency situation is, even to the point of not including vandalism, because I don't think that is an emergency situation where there might be a loss of life.
Trustee Watts?
So out of curiosity, and I know pre-COVID, could you give us an example, I know it's probably not offhand, how many times, for instance, in a school year, 911 has been called?
Oh, it gets called, I don't even know, David, I don't even know if I can estimate. I mean, we have 911 probably weekly, right? Because it could be a staff, you know, it could just be a medical issue with a staff.
Ms.
or
Harris is
someone had a
looking it up
seizure.
right now, so she'll be able to give us an answer.
I'm sorry?
Ms. Harris is looking it up.
Oh, okay.
Last year, 75.
75 calls, is that in the last school year?
That was last school year. The year prior was 150.
And 150, that would have been in the 2018-19 school year?
When we
So
were actually
if
in
we
the
were
building.
saying that the cameras would be able to be accessed every time a 911 call, so we're looking at, you said the previous school year was
50.
150 times the Dearborn Police then would be able to access the camera if the 911 call,
I don't think it's an automatic, is
I
it?
guess if 911 was
It would-
then
I guess
need,
you
or,
would determine what situation, right?
right.
Yeah,
I mean, certain situations may or may not be needed.
warrant it, yeah.
Because we know that some of the 911 calls are for medical.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, we already
So I don't
know,
think
it's
that
already
is-
reported, so then we know someone had a seizure, you know, as an example.
This is not like hooked up to a buzzer kind of thing where you dial 911, it automatically turns on
So
the
I
feed to
think we need to go
dispatch.
back to the again, I think there's a lot of that gray area, so I think we need to probably, like what Trustee Moses was saying, is perhaps, you know, kind of more defined, because it's not necessarily triggered by a 911 call, right? So we know it's not going to be accessed every single time 911 is called. So then the option would happen after a 911 call, but then who would determine whether or not the 911 call would then trigger the video?
I would think it'd probably be at your switch. You guys would determine the emergency. I would think it would be through, you know, depending on what the emergency is, they would determine if there's a need to go in and look, because you have access during an emergency. Obviously, an active shooter, we know, we already
Right.
said that. There could be a medical situation though, too. For example, we had staff members administering CPR. I know they were also talking to someone on the phone for the person to be able to see. I would think that would be valuable for first responders on the medical side, for the fire department, you know, as another example.
Well, I guess what they're asking for is clarification. All right, would it be a building administrator who said, I have to call 911, we've got a fire emergency in the basement, and we need this, or would we
I
be
mean-
calling the IT department then saying, okay, can you get dispatch on and into the cameras? I think that's where they want some clarity
think-
as to who makes that.
I mean, the building principals will then know that that is available, so obviously if it's something, when they're calling 911, depending on the situation, and it may not be an administrator, you could have just a teacher, you could have a teacher or a support staff, it could be, you know, someone that just came in from the public had called 911 too from a cell phone, so, you know, there's a lot of different.
Well, we want to know who would have the authority to then say.
Well, it's set up through the IT department. So it's not like it's available for any emergency, and through that active directory, right, Bob?
Correct. So they do have access through the Active Directory like that, so.
Come up to the microphone.
Okay.
Through the IT system, they would have access, but they would have to trigger it, right?
Correct.
At the,
They would be able to log in and everything. So I think one of the clear points that we want to make right there too is when dispatch gets the information about what type of situation it is, a determination can be made at that point. Like if it is an active shooter situation, yes, we would want to be able to use the cameras. If it's a non-major emergency, depending on what type of medical situation it is like that, you might want to hold off on that.
But wait, now what you're saying is dispatch would be making the decision, or would we be making? Because the understanding was that we would have the call.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that was always the conversation that we
Nobody
had.
wants to answer that
That we,
question.
yeah, no, and I agree. That we would have the control of telling dispatch, okay, we want you able to see, have eyes in the room, so to speak.
and it could be.
But it should be from us,
Sure.
not from dispatch saying, hey, this call, I want to go,
Well-
because that's where then the concern comes. Can somebody
Sure,
from
makes sense.
dispatch be bored and say, I want to, take a look?
It would have to be whoever's in charge at the time in the building, because obviously they'd be close to it, right? Because you're not gonna have time to be getting a hold of us at central office. It'll be, the building principals will have to have that
That's what I'm saying, is it
information.
the
Or
building
whoever's there, if the
administrator? Yeah.
assistant is in charge at the time, or whoever the acting current, principal is at that time would have to make that decision.
Trustee Barry, did you have additional question?
Yes. I'm still not very clear. Now, we're getting different answers here. We have 33 buildings. You're telling me there's 33 possibly people that can push that button to connect the link? Is that what you just said?
The link is already there, right?
Okay, well,
Bob?
somebody
I
has to
don't
turn
know
it
if
on, right? Somebody has to turn it on. Earlier, you were saying they, I didn't know if you were referring to the police department or the administrators. Who would make that call to connect that link, to turn that link on? From what I understood it, just like trustee Petrikov is, we're making that decision.
So the link is there, right, Bob?
link is there.
It's there, it doesn't need to be turned on, it just needs, somebody just needs to be
So it's actively
permission-
on then?
It's actively on all the time,
Whoa,
and the
okay.
reason,
So that
and the
gets me-
reason is, just to explain, is because, and it was discussed, and this was one of the options that could be there. You could do it the other way, where you could say, but then somebody has to call somebody, and you have to have certain people with that access to be able to, so we could do that. But the recommendation wasn't, because we didn't want to lose any time, any seconds or times. That's why we're recommending it this way, not to, call me and I then go on to the phone and change it. So that, we're not recommending that.
Dr.
Now,
Malenko.
we could do it, though. We could do it.
Yeah, Dr. Malenko, if you bring us a contract saying the only time the police department will have eyes and ears into our buildings is if there's an active shooter, we're done. We can just go home right now. But that's not what I'm hearing tonight. I'm hearing a lot of different answers here. Obviously, this agreement is not public, correct? So we can't get into the meat and potatoes. The agreement says one thing, what we're talking about here, what I'm hearing says something. I'm gonna paint a picture here. Let's say there's a brawl at one of our high schools in the cafeteria. 30 young people are involved. Somebody didn't like the food that day and started a fight. The assistant principal thinks it's out of hand, it's a 911 emergency, let's do this. That's possible. Yes, no?
I mean, it could be possible.
It could be
yeah.
possible,
Depending
yes.
on the emergency.
Okay,
yeah.
so if I'm a sworn police officer and I just saw somebody get assaulted, I have a duty to do what I need to do, okay? With our philosophy, we used to have the zero tolerance. Now we got the restorative practice policy that we're following that did some tremendous amount of results for our graduation rates, student success, what have you. You know what I'm talking about. When you have a middle school student that's suspended for 68 days because he likes to laugh in class or whatever, we're not going to hold him back in that middle school, and we send him to high school, and as soon as he gets to high school, he leaves, he checks out. That's no longer happening right now because we're doing a great job at Woodworth, at Stout, at Bryant, at Salina, at Smith. We're doing a great job there keeping the students in the seats, okay? So if something like that happens in one of our cafeterias, police officers, by law, I mean, they took an oath. If somebody gets assaulted, they have to come in. Where our assistant principals, our social workers understand our students a little bit more, might handle a little bit differently. So is that, going back to, Trustee Watts, you asked multiple questions, I don't think they were answered. What, I can't get into here, I can't discuss this, but some of the stuff that's in here is not what I'm hearing today,
I mean,
so.
the intent isn't to be using it, though, for students. The intent is really just it's for an emergency situation to try to save a student. I mean,
And what
that's
is-
the honest
what is-
intent.
What is that, what is considered an emergency? 1, 2,
Well,
3,
if-
4 people have asked that question, and we're not getting clear answers. Okay, I'll leave it at that then.
Okay.
Additional questions before I get to mine? Trustee McDonald, did you have anything?
My questions have basically been answered, and I had a lot of the same questions that have been brought up. The one thing that I'd like just a little clarification on it, if you can, we were talking about there's a 911 notification, and then that goes to the dispatcher and the supervisor. Now, if that system is triggered, just say for whatever reason, and it is a legitimate reason, the system is triggered, what happens next? does that dispatch talk to the police who are on the scene and direct them? Or, I mean, what steps are in between that?
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of things will happen. If the dispatcher can determine what's needed at the scene, they can order EMS, a fire truck, or additional backup, and in real time, give the information to the responding unit. So that's what would happen with that information.
Any additional questions, trustee McDonald?
So then after that information is given to the responding unit, that basically cuts off the need at that point, or?
Yeah, once it's under control, there's no more need to get additional information.
Okay,
And-
so if it was a situation, I'm just going back to the active shooter, and then in some of those situations, there's more than one. So you may have somebody at one part of the building and somebody at another part of the building, and then I'm assuming the dispatcher is talking to different officers, directing them to different parts of the building until the situation is under control.
Yeah, best case scenario, that would work that way, yes.
Okay. I too, again, my questions had a lot to do with specifics of emergency and that kind of thing, the things that have already been brought up. So I just want some clarification on those as well. Thank you.
Let me go through my items then. Oh, sorry.
I'm just gonna say we can put together a list, if that helps to clarify.
Well, that brings me to one of the things I was going to bring up is, when in doubt, I want our administrators to do what is most cautious, which might mean make the call to 911, so they don't have to worry about that. And I don't think we want them to have to read through a list of these are the reasons that we're giving you permission to call 911. So we do want to keep it a little bit vague. I would like the administrator to be able to work with the dispatcher, just say this is the status of things, and let the dispatcher kind of feel out. That's what dispatchers do. They're trying to determine what's going on, and then have them possibly be able to ask us about having the access. So that was one thing that I wanted to bring up and just make sure that everyone considers on that item. The camera access, this is not gonna be actively monitored, we've said, right? We don't have anyone in the district that's actively watching cameras.
No.
So it's not until we hear from somebody at a building that we're probably gonna know about this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we don't have
Okay.
staff to be monitoring. I mean,
Okay.
if something were to happen, yeah, then that's when the staff would say.
Now, an example was brought up then again about 911 calls, and say that it wasn't somebody that works at the building, or say that it's a staff member or a community member that's in there, there's something that's going on, they just get on their cell phone. I mean, like, what's our policy for our staff? Do they have to go through a phone in their classroom, or can they just get on their cell phone if there's some emergency, and then the police call back to the central office of that building?
I mean, if they have to use the cell, they can, but it's better if they can use their landline, because then we get notifications down here at central office as well, when 911. But in some cases, when you're in an emergency, what is the first thing you might do is you might grab the cell phone.
One, and we've talked about sporting events. I mean, just say that it's a PE class that's outside. They don't have their classroom, so they've got to do that. And I know this is something that has been talked about at the City Relations Committee, but that's usually in a closed session. So if any of the questions I ask go too far that way, and it's not something we want to put out there publicly, just please let me know. How would the police have access to the buildings? If we're in a lockdown type of situation, they still need some type of access card to get into a building? Or do we have like a button that you can press that opens up doors in a building? Or is that?
That one I may not want to.
That's
They
fine.
have access, but I'm not going to mention
That's fine.
publicly.
That's fine.
far.
Well, I knew I was probably gonna get to that point. The other one, Chief, is more to you. One of the things we've got with the schools, we've got a lot of large buildings. So there's other large buildings in the city of Dearborn. Do you have similar things with employers or places, whether it's the mall, the Rouge Complex, the hospitals? I don't know if they've got active police forces, private police forces that are armed, but how do you deal with the other groups in this type of situation?
you know, I'm not absolutely sure that we get a direct feed, but I can tell you, at the malls, for example, you bring them up, they show us the video as soon as we hit the door as to who we may be looking for, what has occurred. They give us a disc right away on all the information, a bank robbery the same way. In a perfect world, we would get all them on board so that our dispatchers could have that information. We haven't got there yet. The hospitals, similarly, when they have an assault that takes place in their ER or in their waiting room, they'll give us the video. So we have a very trusting working relationship. And I can tell you that with everything that the Wayne County prosecutor looks at, they're looking at video now, whether it's the in-car video, whether it's the video for the shoplifter, drunk driver, everything is captured on video. And that's just the way the world works today. And I can tell you that with the schools, the greatest thing I can promise you is accountability. If somebody looks at a video, they're going to leave a footprint. And if that was unauthorized, we can check them every week, we can check them every day, we can check them every month, whatever's deemed reasonable to hold people accountable. I think that's a great safeguard. If anybody looks at it, you can't do it in secret. So what's the purpose? And if it was not an appropriate use, then there's consequences for that.
Okay. Trustee Watts?
So just a couple of things, and I know that Dr. Maleko, you had said that there's trust between, the admin and the police department, but I think we need to make sure that we have trust with the parents and the community, and I think that's why I'm asking for the details, because as much as, we have a list, and you're saying, the list may not be in all, but we have parents who are sending their children to school, and they're hearing the cameras, and God forbid it, I never want our cameras to be used for an active shooter. I don't want them to be used, but things have changed in the last 4 years. I know 4 years ago we were talking about the cameras, and there have been some issues that we've had as parents to discuss with our children about our cultural and social societies and what's happened in the last couple of years. So I think part of it is flushing this out and having these discussions so that parents do know that we're doing our due diligence. And we're saying that this would be used in an emergency, and if 911 was called, who would be the one that would say, go ahead and look at the feed? Is it dispatch? Is it the principal? Is it the assistant principal? Who is that person in charge? Have they had, for one principal in one school, they may deem, yes, go ahead and look into the feed. Maybe another principal would say, no, don't look into the feed. So we need to have some sort of cohesion along our schools to say, okay, this would then trigger asking the police to look at that video. I think these are the things we need to probably flesh out some more.
Any additional comments? Thank you very much, everyone, for, oh, sorry, Trustee McDonald.
I just want to say something. What has been said here tonight, our primary objective is we do have to keep our students safe, no matter what. That's top. We have to do that. But I also do want to recognize what Trustee Berry said, that we also have done a lot in the way of making our students better at what, I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble. Just what Trustee Berry said, we've made a lot of strides on having our students do the right thing, and instead of being, you'll have to excuse me, I'm on a lot of medication. And
Roxanne, are
I'm having
you
some
referring
trouble.
to restorative practice? We're
Yes,
using?
thank you. The
Yeah,
restorative
yeah, I mean,
practice.
that's
I
working.
think that's
That's, I mean, it's working,
absolutely.
and we're
So it's a
seeing the
balancing
fruit
act.
there.
We have to be able to have what's in the best interest of our children, not only their safety, but also their security, their mental health, and everything that they're doing forward. And in that way, it's important that we do keep some control over being able to give them what they need and not just punitive, is what I want to say. So hopefully I'm clear what I'm trying to say. And again, my apologies.
So I think what we will be doing then is continue to work with the administration and the city to continue to craft the verbiage in any type of agreement that we would consider.
I guess one last question. Is there a deadline to do this, or?
No.
No.
Okay. So there's no grant or anything like that that we're meeting, or?
No.
This is a freebie.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
make sure. I
Yeah,
mean, if we're
that's why,
I mean,
there is no rush.
Okay.
There's no rush.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
Next item.
Renaming of Bon Appetit at MBCC, Ms. Shannon Peterson and Dr. Winfred Green.
Good evening again. I have the easy part. I just have to introduce them. So tonight we have Dr. Winifred Green. She's the principal of STEM, Magnet, DCMST, and Michael Berry Center. We have Mr. Osama Beydoun, who is the assistant principal of STEM, Magnet, DCMST, and the Michael Berry Career Center. Dr. John Barrow, who is our CTE Perkins supervisor, and Chef Karen Pokrivke, who is wonderful with the kids, and they have a request regarding Bon Appetit.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Peterson, and good evening, Dr. Maleko, President Thorpe, and trustees. Again, I want to thank you for allowing us to be here this evening to speak to you about the possible renaming of the restaurant at the Michael Berry Center. It is with great pleasure for me to make this recommendation, as before her passing and her retirement, Eleanor Shepard was extremely dedicated to her field of hospitality management and culinary arts. She had this dedication and passion while at the Wheel Inn at Fordson High School, and she brought that same passion and dedication to Bon Appetit Student Restaurant at the Michael Berry Center. With that being said, the possibility of naming the Bon Appetit in her honor is very exciting. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and we have a short presentation. First would be Dr. Barrow to continue this brief presentation. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Hi, members of the board, thank you. It's me again, fully vaccinated, so I'll take my mask off. So we are here today to talk to you about renaming the restaurant. I think many of you have been there and seen what we do there, so I'm gonna go through this fairly quick, and then Chef Karen here is available. She's been the one on the ground kind of doing this, so she'll be, available to answer questions. So just a little bit of background. We have had a culinary arts program for more than 25 years going back. The original restaurant was the Wheel Inn. Many of you have fond memories of it, and Ellie cooking lunch and Friday buffets over in Fordson in what's now the Academy's office. In 2006, when we opened the Michael Berry Career Center, the Wheel Inn came over. I mean, physically, they picked up all the equipment and moved it over there. At that time, there was a real push towards sort of chef school and fine dining, sort of in the French tradition. And so the restaurant was renamed the Bon Appetit, and the curriculum was kind of towards that kind of very narrow focus, that sort of fine dining, 5-star Michelin restaurant preparation. And ran very successfully on that model under Ellie's leadership for very many years. A little bit further, as Ellie retired, Chef Shepard in 2017, Chef Karen Pokrivke came on, who came to us from the college program. She is an instructor there as well, and so created that transition between our high school program and the Henry Ford College program. And as you know, that's our bachelor's degree program that turned us from a community college into a college. So very important to maintain that connection and that pathway for our students into that. As she came on and has been watching the trends in the world around us, there was a real shift away from that, again, very narrow, focused fine dining to a more broad, sort of casual dining or preparing kids for many careers, the cruise ship, the entertainment industry, and let's face it, we're in Dearborn. We've got more than a handful of really good restaurants that aren't fine dining, but are the finest dining you'll ever find, correct? And so there's been sort of a change in what we teach kids to do, focusing on not maybe just purely classical techniques and being more practical and preparing kids for a broader sense of careers. So Karen has also brought that same, passion and working with her students and respect for her students, whatever that Ellie did. Just as a background thing, unfortunately, shortly after she retired, Ms. Shepherd, Ellie, did pass away. And then the last part, obviously, we did not operate last year, not only with the district's COVID restrictions, you've seen what's gone on in restaurants and everything around us. So we're at a tipping point, and as we go forward and get ready to reopen that program, under Dr. Maleko's guidance, we are really forging ahead, full speed ahead with returning to face-to-face instruction, and hopefully, based on the health department guidance, opening that restaurant, to the public in some manner next year. So twice a year, Karen will meet, as is required by all of our career and tech ed programs, with our advisory committee. They were obviously over Zoom the last 2 years, but many of you I know I've seen at our advisory meetings we do over at Michael Berry. We pack that building full of community members. We feed them dinner, often from Karen. And the purpose of those meetings is to have our community members advise us on our program. Are you teaching them curriculum that's relevant? Are there new trends that we need to be aware of? And it's really forging a partnership or a bond between those local businesses and our career and tech ed programs. And so something that's come up is this ongoing discussion as Karen has sort of evolved that restaurant into that broader, sort of more casual, more, much like Ellie, kind of light and airy and welcoming kind of place. That maybe it was time to sort of rebrand the restaurant, and that's the term we used for a long time. Should we rebrand? Should we get a different logo? Should we paint the walls? And that discussion has gone on through multiple ones of these meetings. And somewhere in there, the idea of possibly renaming the restaurant in honor of Ellie Shepherd, who put all those years in, and, to be honest, a lot of our advisory members are her ex-students going back 25 plus years. So that has come through, and I know Karen has more of the details, but I know it's been an ongoing point of discussion in more than 2 or 3 or 4 of these meetings. And so we've kind of come up with the idea of kind of doing them both at the same, rebranding it, and then maybe incorporating something to honor Ellie in there. These were some of our advisory, renaming committee, the people who broke off and sort of talked about this. But as I said, many of you have seen what we do. If I tried to list everybody, it'd be a novel because so many people have come through there. In a large part, students in the program, students who participate in our advisory committees, some of our student ambassadors, our student leaders have all pitched in. And often they, will share, and alumni students will share those memories of Ellie. So definitely the students had a large part in this discussion as we go forward. So our proposal, after lengthy discussion and several second place things, was to rename the Bon Appetit to Ellie's Eatery, kind of following a trend with eateries in general being common right now, as a more fast, casual, friendly, welcoming, kind of light and airy thing. And then the idea is maybe work with some of our design students throughout the district about coming up with that new logo and some stuff. Again, I think it's a little too early to say definitively what we're gonna do in October next year, but the plan is to, at some point, have some kind of grand reopening, kicking off Ellie's Eatery, maybe doing a little quick remembrance of her, and sort of welcoming the public back in. So that's what we're proposing, is just kind of do that. And again, Chef Karen can step up with me if you have any questions. We would gladly field those.
Yes.
Any questions or comments? Trustee McDonald?
Yes, I think this is a long time coming, and it's a fantastic idea, not only in keeping up with times and trends and the needs of our students, but also as an homage to Chef Eleanor Shepherd. But I also want to say I have gone to Bon Appetit many times. I've taken family members for lunch there on many occasions. It's wonderful. The community is not aware of it. They don't know. And if you go to look up Bon Appetit online, you get a culinary arts magazine, you get all these other things, and it's really hard to find our gem of a restaurant at the Michael Berry Center. So I think this is just outstanding. I think it's tremendous that we're going to name it after Chef Shepherd, and I am 100% on board with this. And I want to thank everyone that has put in such time and effort into making that such a gem. And we do need to let the community know about it. It is an excellent way for our students to gain skills in the culinary arts industry.
I agree, thank you.
Trustee Moser.
I think Trustee Barry had a question. No?
I think it was just signaling me for Trustee
Are we
McDonald.
going to recognize Chef Shepherd in some way or form in front of the restaurant?
I think when we talk about that grand reopening, again, that's the plan. I'm just, under Dr. Malako's guidance, like I said, we're all going ahead, but we don't know what August is gonna bring, so we're kind of waiting to flesh out the details on that until we have some better guidance on what we can and cannot do. So that is our plan, we just can't definitively commit to it right now.
Sure. Great move.
Any additional comments? Oh, sorry, go on, Dr.
No, I'd like to say something. As we were talking about the teachers and what they have done this year under circumstances related to COVID-19, and it has been very difficult for everyone. But I park my car in the back of the school, and I come through the restaurant every day. And I just want to commend Chef Prokrivki for how she has handled the virtual situation with her students. I've told her many times, you should have your own cooking show. And she has been great. I shared that with Ms. Peterson as well. But she has really been great in keeping the students engaged, and it's really been something to witness over the past year. So I just wanted to recognize her in front of everyone.
I appreciate that, and I do take great consideration that the vast majority of you do come to the restaurant, and I cannot.
Could you
wait to
please
have
get
people
closer
back.
to the microphone?
Oh, I'm so sorry, and I'm so short too. But again, I just said I wanted to thank everybody, because I know most of you do patronize my restaurant, and the students do great work, and I'm looking forward to the day that I have everybody back in the restaurant again. So thank you for taking the time to listen to us today.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you all for being here.
Can I just say something else too? Is that I've seen so many students that have showed up, and in her class, they found their purpose, they found their passion, and it's been great to see that over the years. Thank you, Chef K.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Thank you.
Next item is citizen participation. Citizens wishing to address the board on agenda and non-agenda items for action can submit a virtual blue card that will be posted at 4 p.m. on Monday, 7th, 2021 on the district's website, dearbornschools.org/district/board-of-education, or in person by 7:10 p.m. by submitting a blue card to the board secretary. The board may not be in a position to respond to non-agenda items. Therefore, speakers should not anticipate an immediate response to their comments or questions. For the benefit of all concerned, please do not mention the names of students or school district employees. Please keep your comments as brief as possible. The board president reserves the right to limit times. Mr. President, we do have a physical blue card here from Mr. Russ Cavalluna, who would like to address the board on the successful HFEC graduation ceremony.
You've got a 3-minute limit.
No, 60 seconds, I thought it was.
Well, I don't see unanimity in that vote, so I'll just take the largest of that. Mr. President, Dr. Maleko and trustees, thank you for your time. I come before you as the president of Henry Ford College and to congratulate you on what many of you all saw was a successful in-person graduation for the Henry Ford Early College and the Henry Ford Early College Advanced Manufacturing. I was honored to be there with many of you and to see graduates' faces in the flesh and family in the stands at your high school stadium at Dearborn High was personally very gratifying because it shows we're making progress back to what we all really enjoy as education leaders, and that is seeing education change lives and show young people what success feels like. I also want to congratulate you for the relationship that you all have historically fostered between the Henry Ford College and the Dearborn Public Schools, from Dr. Maleko and his predecessor and myself and my predecessors, the community here in Dearborn is very well served, both in education, which is our primary purpose, but also in their pocketbooks. We talked about how much these students saved and their families saved as they moved on to four-year institutions with zero debt and in some instances 90 credits of college credit. I will finally say that this can be, and Dr. Maleko I know knows more about this than I do, this can be the national standard for how P12 districts and community colleges really do lift up the citizens around them. And it's a point of pride for me, and it's a point of pride I know for all of you, and I wanted you to know that I sing that to all the audiences that'll listen, and you all are one of them, at least tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, tonight, and I ask you to keep going with the relationship to any high school student in our area, not just Dearborn students, any student who wants access to college at a very, very affordable rate and at the highest quality. Please come see us at Henry Ford College. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now we have virtual comments. Mr. Joseph Sikanerator, he said, "Good evening. As a citizen of Dearborn and a teacher in Dearborn Public Schools, I'm horrified to hear about the plans of the board that has to pipe a feed from security cameras directly to the police. Has been over a year since the protests last summer about the over-policing the Black community and other communities of color. How the board could possibly miss the entire point of those protests as they happened and in some places continue to happen is frankly outstanding and extremely alarming. Our society idea of justice is punitive, vengeful, and often miscarried, but it does not mean that we should enforce this upon our students and families. Further, security cameras are a reactive way to address problems within schools and communities. The harm still occurs. All we have done is reinforce the school-to-prison pipeline. If we want our students and staff to be safe, we need to invest and practice proactive, healthy ways of harm reduction and conflict resolution within our schools. Of course, this requires more effort, time, and more money that is not a cheap and easy solution. But I and other citizens of Dearborn elected this board to do what is right, not what is easy." Mrs. Yoloxi Portillo, she said, "Thank you for all your dedication to our children and the schools that serve them. My position as a nurse and a mother of 3 small children is that the masks for children in elementary school should be required until vaccinations are available to them. I'm being asked to switch to a virtual program by a specific date. However, no one from any part of the school system, local principal, administrative secretaries, and the superintendent's office can tell me if masks are going to be required for elementary children, and a decision isn't expected until the summer. I would like to know if the children in elementary are going to be required to wear masks for the upcoming school year until vaccinations are made available to this age group. The start of a school year with no social distancing and no mask requirement amounts to taking unnecessary risks with the health and safety of our children. All of the sacrifices that we have as parents, teachers, and students have made up to this point to keep our children safe would be for naught. Normal is not here yet, hopefully soon. I fully understand the risk is lower in the general population because of the efforts of the community. However, the risk is not zero for our children. I ask that you put yourself in the shoes of the parent of the child who develops a serious complication from a COVID a month or 2 before vaccinations roll out." Ms. Amanda Chrysler of Dearborn said, "Good evening, school board. I want to regarding an agenda item for your meeting tonight. I may not have the time to hop on and speak, but I hope so. I'm very concerned and against the surveillance and criminalization of our students that adding police cameras in schools would open doors for. It is proven that policing schools primarily affects Black students and can contribute to lower graduation rates and higher arrest rates among those students. Voting to allow extra surveillance of these students is giving them an additional disadvantage. I've included many articles citing this and how the proposed cameras would damage our students' irreparably. On top of this, concerns about safety are unwarranted and unproven. In our nation, policing schools has continually proven to be useless against real danger. In emergency situation, the likelihood of an officer stepping are slim to none. That is statistical observation which was taught to us at an active shooter training that I took for my teaching position. As a taxpayer who moved to Dearborn specifically for the school systems, I would not ever be comfortable sending my child to a school that was in a police state of constant surveillance. I would especially never feel comfortable sending an adopted or fostered Black child to that kind of school. Education should not be a place to set up children to be caught by police. The school-to-prison pipeline is real, and given this city's history with racism, we should not be pushing for more or just and equalizing actions. Thank you for your time, and cited a few articles for us to view. Mrs. Muna Mashrah of Dearborn says, I understand that the district and the board have been discussing placing cameras in classrooms with potential of giving feedback to police or feed to police at closed-door meetings. If this was to happen, it would be a gross violation of trust and would lead to even more issues for our Black and brown students. We need to stop the school-to-prison pipeline instead of continuing to expand it. In my opinion, there is absolutely no need for cameras in classrooms. Classrooms should be a safe place for students to make mistakes, grow, and learn. This would disproportionately be used punitively against our BIPOC students and families. Why would the district even consider such a decision? The money spent on our cameras and security contracts should instead be used to increase social and emotional support, including adding additional social workers and psychologists, and provide these individuals with therapeutic resources to aid their work with students. Cameras in classrooms are unnecessary addition to our school environment. We also have a comment from Ms. Esmahan Mishrah of Dearborn saying, I'm writing to you as a highly concerned parent and educator of Dearborn Public Schools. It has come to our attention that there have been discussions in regards placing cameras in classrooms that would directly feed to the police department. If this is being discussed with the plans to implement this, then it is deeply concerning and extremely harmful to our community. Not only does this infringe on the privacy rights of our students and teachers, this is another harmful way to monitor and criminalize our students, especially Black and brown students. We know all too well that school-to-prison pipeline is indeed real and unjustly affects Black and brown communities. Our communities do not need a direct feed from the cameras to the police. Regardless of the intention, the impact is dangerous. It is a way to monitor, thaw, and criminalize students. Our community has already experienced an increase in unjust monitoring programs after 9/11 in the name of safety. In light of unjust monitoring that is already done to Muslim and Arab communities, it is unfathomable that the district would even consider camera and face recognition technology in classrooms that would potentially wreak havoc on our community and be used to further criminalize us. Bringing these types of technologies into our classroom will continue to marginalize our community and place harmful tactics to be used against our students and families in the future. Why is this even being discussed? Our classrooms are safe So do not use a safety issue as a response. If the intention is to help support administrators in regards to student behavior, then increase funding for social, emotional, mental health support, such as social workers and psychologists, instead of using it for policing of our students. Is it to monitor teacher behavior? If that's the case, you can continue to dehumanize and disrespect us as professionals in the field, which is insulting. Why are these meetings closed and not open to the public? As parents and community members, we have the right to know what and why things are being done in our schools and where our tax dollars are being spent, and these discussions should not be held in secret without the knowledge of your constituents. I will not give my consent to my children to be recorded and data to be collected to them, to myself in the classroom. I will send my children to school with the presumption that their classroom is safe or is a safe space for them to share and discuss ideas and thoughts, not for them to be monitored and criminalized through technology. This continuous monetization of students and staff is demeaning and should not be happening in Dearborn. Oud Mashrah of Dearborn said, absolutely not, violation of student and teacher privacies and rights. Ms. Stephanie Butler of Dearborn says, informed consent is required for investigational medical therapies, regardless of the lack of safety and efficacy behind the decision to require a child to wear a mask. It is illegal to mandate EUA-approved investigational medical therapies without informed consent. Make use for viral transmission prevention is authorized for emergency use only. Emergency use and authorization by the FDA means the products are investigational and experimental only. The statute granting the FDA and the power to authorize a medical product of emergency use requires the person being administered an unapproved product be advised for his or her right to refuse administration of the product. This statute further recognizes the well-settled doctrine that medical experiments or clinical research might not be performed on human subjects without express informed consent of the individual receiving the treatment. For this reason, I have taken my elementary students out of school until you come up to your senses and stop abusing my children. M. Meshrah of Dearborn says DFT staff and teachers were not informed or asked about their opinions on this video network with police contrary to what was said. Any decision like this should be surveyed to the parents and staff. We should be informed and included and heard instead of having decisions made for us without any input from us. As a parent and staff member of this type of decision makes us all feel like we are important within the district. And that's the end of public comment.
Next item, please.
Do we want to make, obviously there are corrections to those comments and that were said that will be cameras in the classrooms. So we want to make sure to set the record straight that this is not the case.
Very true.
So, next item is action item, special consideration for item. Are there any agenda items on this agenda which board members or the superintendent wish to discuss and vote on separately? If there are, we will exclude them from the motion below.
Any items that members would want to have excluded?
I have a question, and I'm not sure if it's a mistake or perhaps the contingency needs to be cleared, and that's the item on busing. Which one was that? The busing contract?
Was it going to be a question, or would you like the item pulled?
Well, it's going to be a question. Hopefully, if it's a mistake, then we can correct it. That's action item number 9.
All right, so there's question on number 9. Any other questions on any of our action items? All right, then if we can move
Recommended
forward with the motion.
Sure. Move that action items 1 through 20 be approved as recommended in this agenda.
So moved.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by trustee Petlicoff and support by trustee Barry. So trustee Moses, you had a question on number 9.
Yeah, so the contract for this was 2.7 million, and there is a 3% increase for the next year. But the recommended action is to say, not to exceed 3.1 million. So is there a contingency of 3%, or the increase is 3% and then a contingency of 100,000?
We added a little bit with the summer school going on. Transportation is going to be really busy, and we're going to need some help from the contractor. So we just wanted to make sure we had a budget here so we could take care of the transportation needs for this summer and then going into the next school year.
So costs are increased prorated.
So the contract 3%, plus we added a little bit more just to cover any needs. Now, this is just a budget. We don't necessarily have to go there and use it all, but we want to make sure we had a budget that would cover any needs we might need for the summer school this summer, and then for the next 21-22 school year.
We're still recruiting bus drivers.
We are. We're working hard. We just recruited 2. Mr. Sotris in the Transportation Department,
Hey,
but I'll take 2. 2 is a good start. It's better than 0. It's better than going negative.
It's better than, yeah, it's better than none, all right.
And that's another good question, Mr. Trustee Barry. Our contract with National Trails does give us a stipulation that as we recruit drivers, we can take routes
drop
back.
off.
That was a
Yeah.
good move,
Yes.
yeah, thank you.
Trustee Moses, any additional questions that
No,
satisfy it?
so that was good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews, we
very
appreciate it. Any additional discussion on any of the action items? All right, seeing and hearing none, if I could have a roll call vote, please.
Yeah. Trustee Barry?
Yes.
Trustee D'Ambrosio?
Yes.
Trustee McDonald?
Yes.
Trustee Moses, yes. Trustee Petlicoff?
Yes.
Trustee Watts?
Yes.
President Thorpe?
Yes.
At this time, I'll be reading a summary of the agenda items. 1, approval of warrants. 2, approval of award to Quaver ED, Inc. 3, approval of contract increase with DefCan. 4, approval of contract to D Shines. 5, approval of award to Cognia. 6, approval of award to Camp Invention. 7, approval of award to AARO Companies. 8, approval of award to Superior Ground Cover. 9, approval of award to National Trails, Inc. 10, approval of award to Best Asphalt, Inc. 11, approval of award to Great Lakes Environmental, Inc. 12, approval of award to ALC. 13 to 15, approval of non-instructional and instructional personal items for Peter 12. 16, approval of financial statement. 17, approval of 2021-2022 Board of Education meetings per Order Report 20-114. 18, approval of mode of instruction. 19, approval of donations. 20, approval of math coordinator.
Okay, so I am going to congratulate Miss Nadia Musa, who was just approved. I'm going to ask her to come up to the podium to say a couple of words. We can give her a big round of replacing. We know Dr. Feitel, retirement, big shoes to fill, but we know you're up for the task, right?
Yes. Good evening. Nadia Musa, teacher of Fortson High School for 14 years, also a Fortson graduate. So I'm super happy, super excited to be taking on this position. And I hope I do make the community proud, and the Fortson Feeder School is very proud. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good luck.
And I'll be learning from the best. Dr. Feitel has truly got some very big shoes to fill. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I did work a deal with her. She's one of the liaison for my Student Advisory Council, so she's going to stay on and do that next year as a coordinator as well, so. And if I could just mention, I know, appreciate President Cavalluna coming up and the great partnership there, and thank you to the board for promoting that and allowing us to have such a great partnership here between the college. Thank you.
It's been great over the last several months to see the partnership between the P-12 and the college, including things like stepping in and helping out the early college students. Traditionally, that graduation would happen in the fourth auditorium, I believe, over at the college, but due to COVID, we wanted to have an outside activity. We were able to step up with the Dearborn High field for that one. And the P-12 side has been very nice to accommodate the college for the board meetings. It had already been the last 2 months, and we're about to have another one next month, but it's great to be able to have this relationship in our community. Next item, please.
Next item is a discussion item with a 30-minute time limit. Policy updates, policy 7544, digital communications, 5341, emergency medical authorization, and 5342, do not resuscitate orders, DNR for minor children. Dr. Glenn Maleko and Mr. David Mastoni.
It would sure be good if you didn't use that whole 30-minute time limit.
I have very little to say. Good evening, everybody. The Board Policy Committee did meet and reviewed the policies that are being brought here for discussion. The one policy is an update. It is a do not resuscitate policy. It's a very rare instance that a student would have one of these. It is usually if a student has several other underlying health conditions and the parents put a do not resuscitate order into place. All this policy really does is it provides our staff with guidance to making sure that the parent clearly communicates that to our staff, the principals and our staff, and so that our staff is aware, and that if any emergency personnel show up on the scene, they are aware. This policy was reviewed by our special education nurses and our special education executive director, Mr. Mike Casale, and they reviewed it to see if it kind of went along with, you know, their policies or their procedures in handling things, and it did. We already have a policy that mentions this, so the policy that we have, it only mentions it. There's only one sentence. We'd have to remove that sentence from that existing policy and then adopt this new policy that provides a little bit more guidance and detail. Any questions on that one? The other policy that the policy committee reviewed and was shared with all the board was a policy regarding digital communications, more commonly referred to social media as social media. This policy was the board had asked that we come up with a policy to help in guiding our staff and our students. You know, we want to walk, you know, we have to be very careful because when it comes to allowing people to have their freedom of voice and have their freedom of speech, we can't interfere and encroach with that. At the same time, we have, just as any other company or corporation has rules and guidance in place that staff members and students should follow when you know, working as a representative of the Dearborn Public Schools. That's what this policy does. It doesn't give any, it's nothing where it says you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. What it does is give some guidance so that people have an understanding of what are acceptable behaviors when using social media and when representing the Dearborn Public Schools as a staff member. This policy has been reviewed by our HR department, who deals with many of these types of issues, and our Student Services department as well, and by our Board Policy Subcommittee. And the recommendations that we bring forward tonight are a policy and then a guideline that accompanies that policy that provides a little bit more detail to that. All this information was shared with the board, and I'm very happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Any questions on the policy? All right, continue.
Thank you. The next step, we then will bring these to the board for a formal vote at the next meeting in accordance with your procedures for policy approval.
Thank you, Mr. Mustin.
Next item is 2021 second budget revision and 2021-2022 budget.
Good evening, President Thorpe, members of the board, and Dr. Maleko. As we do every time in June, we start talking about the budget again. Actually, well before this, but this is where we get close to the deadline. And unfortunately, the state does not have their budget adopted yet, but there's a lot of good information out there, and we'll kind of go through it here quickly. As soon as I put up the screen for you. There we go. So as we go through this every year, I just have the mission statement there just so as for people online can always see what it is. Our budget is growing with the inclusion of a lot of the federal money this last year, and we're going to have a lot more federal money going forward due to the ESSER funds, that our budget is obviously going to grow. And with that, there's a lot of decisions we have to make at the district level. We're adding a new school next year, the virtual K-12 school, which is coming online. You'll actually see that our staffing numbers are lower, just because, with being online this last year, our numbers are lower. And a lot of people had to stay at home and take care of their children. So we've been working on a much reducer staff this last year, which has added to our available funds to actually give us more funds to go forward. But overall, our percentages are still about the same for our free and reduced lunch, our ELL program, and our special education. And feel free to stop me any along the way if you have a question. Otherwise, I'll just keep going, because I know budget you can take hours talking about. So some of us like to do that, but others may not. So I will be cognizant of your time, and you can always contact me later if you have more questions. But I always like presenting this slide, because even though we have a lot of money, a lot of it is dedicated to purposes that we can touch for certain things and other things we cannot. So here you kind of see the summary of budgets where we have on the far right capital projects. That's where we have our building and site fund, which we fund from general fund and from our enhancement millage. And when we actually pass a bond issue, you'll see that in that column also. Next one is the debt funds, where we actually have, where we previously have passed bond issues in the past, or we have refunded bonds. You'll see that in that money. And that's restricted money, though we can't use it for anything else besides that. Our special revenue fund, so anytime we have money coming in the district for a specific purpose, it has to be in the special revenue fund. So you'll see our funded projects where we have a lot of grants like Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, Title V, it goes on. We have our IDA, which is our special ed funds. And new this year, we have our federal grants for the COVID-19 and ESSER grants. And that's where a lot of money is coming in now because of the recent pandemic we've been in. And we also have a new one called GASB 84, where GASB 84 looked at the student activity funds, and we had to kind of reassign or reassess how we spend those. And some of those moved to special revenue, and very few of them remained in the agency funds for student activities like we have in the past. So that's a new one from there. Anything not covered in those special funds, everything else falls into our general fund, which is our main operational budget. So that's kind of what this says. So a lot of time what we spend on is making sure we're spending appropriately the funds that we are given by our community and from the state and federal agencies, that we spend them correctly and properly expense them in the correct funds. So there's a lot of time spent on that. So significant changes for our current year. If you remember, this time last year, it was a lot of doom and gloom because they were looking at prorating us $650 per pupil because of the pandemic was recently new. They weren't know how it was going to impact things. And we were looking at a $13 million reduction in our operational budget. Now, they said, well, we're not going to give you our state aid package right away. They waited till August and had another revenue consensus meeting. And they found out that the state was doing much better because people were spending still on items. So our sales tax revenue, which we get a portion, comes to us. And also the income tax, that people were still money coming into their pockets. And so they were still spending things, so the income tax was also much higher. So it turned around that they did not prorate us that, and actually gave us a little bit of money through 11D of $66 per pupil to, instead of taking away the $13 million. So it was a 180 switch, and which was good because then we can actually run a program that was much more robust than what we were looking at before. There's some other special money on MIPSers. They also did a super blend because they knew a lot of kids were not going to go to school, and that was a whole other process that the instructional side took on. They did a super blend because they figured they didn't want to show the big loss in students because that impacts our revenue as we get a money per pupil for every student that we have from the state funding. So they gave us super blend, they looked at the prior year, blended it with our current year, and that saved us about $1.4 million we would have lost in revenue. So they did that super blend. And so as we look forward, just looking at the state, you'll see on the far right side, the blue section, that's sales tax. So 46% of our money comes from the 2% of the 6% the state charges on every sales tax item. On the other side, the lighter blue is the income tax. So between those two, a lot of our money comes from that. And as they saw through the pandemic, that we did not see that big of a reduction, so therefore, our revenues didn't have to get prorated, and we were much better off this year. So I just kind of give you a picture of where the money comes from the state. And as everybody asked, lottery, yes, all the money from lottery goes into it, but only makes 7% of our total funds available to the state for schools. Very important, but again, it's not a big portion. It's the sales tax and income tax are the two biggest ones. So just looking at the current economy, this came from the state during the revenue consensus. As you can see, in 2021, that last column on the right, the blue bar, was up, 5.6% higher, or million more than what, or billion, what they reported than what they expected. So that's why we were allowed to actually have a more robust state aid this current year. And you can see the graph where it went down real quick for the pandemic, but it quickly shot back up. Same thing for income tax growth. You can see in 2020 actual was 3.6%, but projection for 21 was up much higher. So there's a lot of money in the state aid budget for future funding for schools. And that's just the revenue estimates that I won't really go into, but just some data there. Same thing with baseline growth before tax changes. Again, you see the red was much higher than what they expected. So I put this slide in here. This is what they projected last May, this current month of May that we just passed, of what they thought the revenues were going to be. The important thing, the graph on the bottom shows how much money they estimated difference from last January. So you're talking anywhere from $1.8 billion to $2 billion more than they thought we were to get in January of 2021. So you can see, and even in January, they were still very conservative on what the revenue was going to be. But now, and that's what we saw in our state aid packages as we went through the process of what the governor was going to think, the Senate, the House was going to give us. But now they have anywhere from 1.8 to 2 billion more in the school aid fund than what they thought before. So now that they're back talking at the table to figure out how to handle that money. So we were looking anywhere from like 50 to 120 for revenue increases to schools. Now they're talking well over $100 and more that they could give us. But again, we don't control that process. 80% of our revenue comes from the state, so we have to wait for what the state decides on what they're going to do on the revenue for schools going forward. But it looks very promising that our revenue will be even higher than what we're estimating in the budget, because we worked on the January numbers to how we developed the budget. So I expect as we go forward, the numbers will get better, not worse from here. So when we look at the three big items that we always talk about is our taxable values, our foundation allowance, and student count. Those are the big three that really make up a big portion of our revenue. So taxable values did increase 1.8%, which is under CPI, so we have no rollback of taxes on the Headley impact, that if our growth in taxes exceed the cost of inflation, we have to roll back some of our taxes unless we do a Headley override. And we don't have to worry about that. Our foundation allowance was flat this year, outside of that categorical they gave us. But for next year, we're estimating at $80 as a conservative amount right now for what we're looking at in additional revenue. Now, the student count, they have not stated yet if they're going to do another super blend like they did this current year. So we're not aware if that's going to happen yet. The one, the governor recommended, but the other two did not. So therefore, we don't know if that's going to happen or not. And even progressing, we're looking at a 500 student, a little over $500 student decrease or student count decrease this year, just on our normal of looking at the births and our current enrollment. But so you're looking at a total of potentially of a 668 reduction in student counts from last year to this year if they don't do the super blend. So that's a big number for us. So we have to be careful and be cognizant of what's that going to happen going forward. Looking at staffing, we're in our fourth of our fifth year with most of our unions. And on the fourth and fifth year, we look at the increase in our foundational allowance for what percentage we give to all the union groups. So right now, on the $80, you're looking at a 0.9% increase in our staffing costs based on the union contracts, and we kind of, the exempts follow the union contracts in that percentage. And we are looking at a full program next year, so going back to, in-person, full-time, along with our new K-12 virtual school. And our infrastructure, with the ESSER funds, we'll get a little more into, that a lot of our current operational costs, we're able to move into ESSER, which is rare for federal programs, but we're able to do that, which freed up some money in our general fund so we can start working on some of our infrastructures as we continue to work on our long-term capital plan through with the community. So as part of any budget hearing, you have to look at your tax rate that you're going to levy as a public institution. And we are on the top 4 items on that chart. So we levy the 6.17 mils on our homes, our homestead property, that's our hold harmless millage. We have the 18 mils that we have to levy as part of our school aid formula. If we don't levy those full 18 mils, then we get less money per pupil. The state assumes you're gonna levy it, and that's how they calculate how much we get per pupil. So anything less than that is a direct withdrawal from our budget. And the next 2 are the debt millage. So we are continuing at the 3.5 mils. That's what we're doing currently this year, and we'll continue at the 3.5 mils for next year. And also, since we do one tax request for both us and the college information is below there. But I'm sure you'll hear that at the budget hearing as part of their process. But we are, and again, the first red section in circles, if we actually had a Headley rollback, you would see that number be 0.9 something. So therefore, we would actually have to roll back our millage that we would levy by that percentage. And just looking at A and B on the far right-hand side, just be aware that, for the homestead, our hold harmless, and our operational millage of 18 mils, they expire in June of '24. So we just have to be aware that at some point, we're gonna have to go back to our community and ask for a renewal of that millage.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
Can you remind me, for the hold harmless, is it usually a 5 or 6 year request?
I believe we did a 10-year renewal.
It's 10? Okay.
David was here, I think he was here, I think it's a 10-year renewal.
It's 10 by law.
Because when I came here, I said, yay, no millage
You have to do it
renewal,
every
right when
10
I first walked in the door.
Thank you.
Yes.
I can't see these numbers. The one, debt note 2, that's set to expire next year?
Correct, but then the 13-14 bonds, that money then will jump up, so it'll continue to probably most likely 3.5 next year for 22-23, and then it will drop again after that.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking questions. All right, just giving you a pictorial of our foundational allowance from the history. You can see it went up really high. Then back in 2012-13, when we had that recession, we lost a lot of ground of $470, and it slowly has been ticking up since then. So it's just a pictorial of showing you the history of our foundational allowance. So now we are actually at an all-time high for our foundational allowance as we go forward from here, and hopefully we'll never see another reduction of that size going forward.
Moving forward for this slide, could we just do like the past 10 years and forget
Yes.
about that 2012, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
history is important, though.
One thing, though, that
was
does
a good
show
year.
is if we look back to where we had been before and adjusted for inflation, have we really gotten to an all-time high, or are we still behind where we
But we're still
would
behind.
have
If
been?
you, from your financial background, we're still below where we would have been
Right.
with inflation. Good, I don't usually get that kind of a question, that was good. All right, just looking at, again, one of our big items is our student count. Again, with the super blend for the current year is 20,580 is what our funding was based on. But again, go looking at our reduction of our 500 students and potentially the super blend, we're down to 20,087 for our student count for next year. So it is a reduction.
So the blend last year worked to our advantage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Gave us
This
about
possibly
1.4
is
million
work-
more.
Exact opposite.
But again, they haven't talked about continuing the super blend, so we have to budget going back to what we normally would have, what our normal actual.
You said that would cost us how much, I'm sorry?
It's later in the presentation, it's
Okay.
about 4.5 million that we have to reduce for student loss.
Mr. Wall,
Yes.
does this include the virtual school?
Correct, it does,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Because right now, those students are currently in the current stout, so another school doesn't change the total numbers that we're looking at here.
just moves where they're at, not.
Now, we
Not out
don't,
of our
you know, we
numbers.
don't necessarily account for additional students coming in for just our virtual school that we might grab from other school districts in Dearborn. Because we are a closed district, we only allow students that are actually part of our staffing are allowed to come here. Otherwise, they have to live in Dearborn to attend our school.
There are some of our residents that send their schools a private school that might consider that. I don't know
Correct.
if we're reaching out to them.
Correct. Yeah, Mr. Bashir's office does a great job
Yeah.
on that whole area.
Thank you.
So this is looking at, I know this is small numbers, but this is looking at our overall plan of where we look at. So if you look at the top, is just the historical of our fund balance, so you can see historically how we have done. And that was one of the main goals when I first came here, is adding to our fund balance to get us more back to one, to get out of borrowing annually, because our state aid actually comes from October through August. So we're always in a state cash flow issue, so we were able to avoid that. And to give us our better credit rating, you know, because every time we go out for a bond for borrowing or for any purpose, we get a credit rating assigned to how healthy financially we are. And we usually try to get between 15 and 20% is what the state organizations usually look at us to have a standard fund balance for our type of entity. Now, looking at this year, we're looking at roughly a $2.4 million surplus. But as we run closer to the end of the year, we'll most likely have additional money because we don't spend it all, and some of it carries over to next year. So we're looking at roughly about a $7.4 million surplus this year. So that will add to our fund balance, as you will see in the audit that usually gets done in September and gets reported out in October. And then looking forward, you expect we run the same program we have, but then we modify it as part of our budget process. So that $7.4 million will carry forward. But if you can see that student loss of 505 students is roughly about $4.5 million we're going to lose on our state aid formula because we're going to have less kids that we're going to get per pupil. We have money in there for the enhancement millage, but again, we don't combine with the general fund because that's separately handled, but it is combined with the general fund. But health insurance is going up 3.3%. That is what the fixed cost is. Our salary cost, based on the 0.9, will be about a $1.1 million increase to the budget. The step increases is $5.6 million. So as a teacher moves up a scale, not just the teachers, but all the unions, if they're union scale, we have a range that they move up. That will move up to roughly about $5.6 million. We estimate about 50 retirements. Most of those will probably happen late in the year, because most of them will work this summer, hopefully, before, that, so we expect 50. And we range anywhere from 50 to 70 every year because of our large staffing, so that's not uncommon. We're estimating the $80 increase, so that'll bring in $1.5 million. And we have a bunch of miscellaneous items of roughly about $1 million, so we're looking at a budget surplus of roughly about $400,000 for next year. And that will give us roughly about a 17.69% fund balance at the end of next year. Now, unfortunately, this time of year, since the state runs from October through September, they're not always in a rush to give us their numbers. So we're always doing our budget this time of year on estimates. It's just what it is. But I want to make sure people know what the estimates we're using so they can understand as things change, they can at least know what we base it upon, and it's conservative, that it'll probably get better from here.
Mr. Wall, 2 quick items. First, following up on what you just said, and this is a general comment that if any state legislators are hearing right now, great. It is so stupid that we run on a different calendar than the state of Michigan, and that we've got to guesstimate what's going to happen until they figure things out. So that's my editorial. The second thing is when we look over here and we see our fund balance, and it looks like a good fund balance, and it's right in the range that you talked about, but we're still in the situation where we've got the enhancement millage from Wayne Reese, and I know ever since we started getting that, that's what kind of gave us a little bump up in our fund balance years ago.
Right, because we took the money in one year and we actually spent it the next year. So that $7 million is a buffer that we have in our fund balance.
So as long as we keep having that enhancement millage, these numbers can look good. But if that enhancement millage goes away, our fund balance is going to drop significantly the year after that when we use that last year's funds. So just for everyone to keep that one in mind, that right now we might look good, but if that money goes away, we're going to be falling down at least a few percent.
Right.
We're
Thanks.
back to 12%, close to 12%.
and recognize that we try not to put too much into the enhancement fund millage on operational costs. It's more of a supplemental to enhance the program. And I give credit to Dr. Maleko, you know, people pressure him all the time to spend that money, but we don't do that, knowing that there could be a funding gap later in that process.
Right. It's a fiduciary reason that we can't always assume that that money will be there.
Yeah, so we don't
In-
want to
in
have it
infinitum.
committed to something that we have to sustain
Yes.
for a
Yeah,
long
and that might look a
term.
lot of money, but that's maybe 2 to 3 months worth of operational costs in our district. So, you know, if we actually have a big gap where the state doesn't give us our money for our state aid, that's gonna go really quickly. So looking, this is just a greater breakdown of the student counts, showing you the top is where we're currently funded at 20,580 with the super blend. The next column down shows you if we were actually using our normal blend, it'd be 20,400 students. That's shaded in gray, showing a $1.4 million loss that we would have seen. And in the bottom, just showing the net effect of where we would be with a regular count for next year with the super blend gone and the additional 500 student loss. This shows you just some of the assumptions that we have. Right now, at the top left in the red parentheses, we're at $8,842 per student. So looking at the most likely columns is what we based our budget upon. Sometimes we would actually be in the last column when we actually know where they're headed, but unfortunately, with the current state, we don't know that, so we go with our most likely scenario. So $80 is what we're going to increase by. And with the 505 student loss, you see where we actually lose $4.5 million on that with the student loss. The bottom just shows you our cost for the increase in the contracts for each one as we look at the $80 increase, which is a 0.9% increase for our staffing costs. All these numbers carry forward to that main screen showing all the assumptions on one page. And this is, I just spent a little time on this one. So with the pandemic, a lot of federal money came our way. So on the top half is showing what we received in 2021. That we have our ESSER funds of $8.4 million, our ESSER's equity fund, which is $1.5 million, it was mainly dealing with special ed. We have GEAR funds that the state gave us of $2.2 million, coronavirus relief funds. Those are the ones we first received back in May, which was very important to get us through that whole time we were shut down. Paying staff, that was still, the state wanted us to pay staff to continue, hence why we saw the increases in our total sales tax and income tax, because people were still getting money in, so they were still buying things. And coronavirus relief, that's what we use for a lot of the supplies for our PPE supplies. And so that's what we got in 2021, and we're gonna spend most of that in 2021. A little bit will carry forward, because we have through December to use it. And anytime you do a budget, you try to stay under your budget, so you always have money left over that'll carry forward. And in 21-23, we're receiving ESSER 2 funds and ESSER 3 funds. Now, ESSER 2 funds, we've only received phase 1. And between a state grant and this is how we're paying for the summer school this summer, that will use up the entire funding. And then ESSER 2 will have for continuing next year for some of the things that we have moved into the top part that's going to carry forward for staffing costs in 22-23, or
Trustee
21-22. Yes.
And you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong here. I heard a report that our state fell behind in spending, I'm assuming it's some of the ESSER funds, that they had a deadline. They had to get it released to us.
Right. They
by
didn't
the
fall
end of
behind.
May.
They chose to tie a lot of the
Well,
language
they
to
didn't get
reduction
it
in governor's
approved,
power,
right.
so yes.
And a lot of districts were saying, hey, we borrowed our own money in anticipation that we were going to get this money, and now you guys have kind of defaulted in releasing that money kind of
Correct.
thing. They're claiming it's okay, we're not giving the money back to the feds, and you're going to get it at some point. Are we in that position with
Yes,
any of this?
because we can't wait for the
For-
release
right.
of funds, so we're going to use part of our fund balance, again, it's a cash flow for these very type of reasons, to be able to make sure our program doesn't get hampered. Because right now, we're buying a lot of supplies for next school year.
Well, that's what I
And
was
with the
worried about.
supplies, you have a lot more longer lead time than we've had in the past. So we're starting to buy that stuff now for next year and using our own general fund money as a cash flow purpose. Because all this ESSER fund, you can charge back as far as March of 20.
So we don't, my concern is, can we trust what's being said?
I think the risk is good, because the state has the money, they just haven't released it to us. And until they do it, we can't actually draw upon it.
How long can they play this game?
For ESSER 2 funds, there was no restriction, but for ESSER 3 funds, there is a date. I'm not sure what that final date was, because I was going back and forth, but ESSER 3 funds, they have to give it by a certain date, otherwise we lose the funds at the state level, which would be catastrophic for a lot of districts.
Well, I was gonna say, and then what happens? Yeah,
Yes.
are we left holding the bag, so to speak?
We have not gone that far down the
Okay.
rabbit hole, but some
All right.
districts have. We've had enough fund balance, and we're able to
right.
make sure we're being careful.
Let's continue to be careful.
Yes.
My faith in this is not real secure.
So ESSER 3 funds, we're getting a total of 86 million for ESSER 3 funds, and that will be for 21, 22, and for 22, 23. Now, obviously, we have not budgeted that because we're not even at that point yet, but
Right.
we know that going forward, that our philosophy in the district was always spend the most restricted funds first and then go backwards, because our general funds are the less restrictive, so we make sure we spend ESSER 3 as much as we can,
Use
so it'll
up the
give general
bu-
fund
yeah.
pressure. Knowing that after 22, 23, there's gonna be a large funding gap as this federal money comes away, we're being careful to make sure that we have the capability to absorb that back in the general fund. So we're doing one-time purchases, which you've seen in some of the other from ESSER 1 funds, of, some vehicles, some buses, some equipment, those type of things. And we're putting some money away in our capital project funds so we can start some of our infrastructure projects. So when actually 22, 23 expires, we know that that money will be used then back for the operational purposes that we've spent in the restricted funds. Now, this is the state or the federal government allows us to do that as long as it meets the 15 criteria established. Usually you can't supplement and supplant money from the other, like Title I. We can't push money to the general fund and then take it back later. You can't do that with federal
Right.
funds, but with ESSER funds, they gave us the flexibility to do that.
So we can use this for, like, our HVAC?
For air handling and
Air
type of
handling
things,
and
has to
all
meet
that
that
kind-
15
yeah,
criteria.
that's in-
Now, you can't build a new building with it, but
But
we have
we
to be
could-
strategic in how
yeah.
we spend it, and we
Okay.
spend a lot of time working on that to make sure we're being appropriate and, efficient with our money. And these are some just the significant changes going forward. I won't read them all, but just know that we've talked a lot about this already, but just out there for the public to look at. But the key issues going forward, we have to watch obviously for the finalization of the school aid fund. Now, they've talked about, since it's very robust right now, and, anywhere from 1.8 to $2 billion, that all of the haggling has kind of gone away, and they're gonna move forward quicker. They even talked by the end of June. But, again, we probably won't have the final numbers because it's less to go through the approval process, so we'll probably adopt a budget very close to this, knowing that in the future, at some time, we'll know we'll have more money to work with. Continue to monitor out and close out the year, expecting to be back to a traditional program. Now, a lot of our staffing, we have been overstaffed this year. So as we go forward, we have to be cognizant of that after 2023, that we're back to our normal staffing models going forward. But right now, we are overstaffed because we're very lenient in how we did our virtual program this year and the traditional programs. We are carrying a lot more staff than we normally would have, but that's okay. There's a lot of things people can do, and we might have lower class sizes for the next couple of years, which is good for kids because of the learning loss. So I think overall, we're doing good on that, knowing that we're watching ourselves, that after a couple of years, we gotta get back to our normal cycle of how we staff for everybody. And again, our infrastructure, that can't wait. So as we'll continue to hear about, our long-term infrastructure plan as we go forward, about maybe getting community involved now sooner than later, so that thing doesn't go away, because that, in a process in itself, takes a year to year and a half to get through that process. So that's something that also will continue.
Trustee Watts.
Last time the ESSER, I think ESSER 2 funds, 43% of those have already been allocated. Is
Correct.
that the same, or has that
Yep,
changed?
43% still has only been allocated, and between the state grant of roughly about 9 million, and that 43 million, most of that will go towards using the summer school program that we're gonna run, because it's more than we normally have done, and then some smaller projects after that.
And then remind me for ESSER 3, is that going to be earmarked for very specific, or is that more lenient and open?
They gave
I
us
can't remember.
12 uses, like mental health, reduction of staff, those kind of things are in there for technology. And that was what the first ones for ESER 12 or ESER 2 was. ESER 3 gave us 15 items. That's where the infrastructure of ear handling was added to it, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
But not capital projects, right?
I'm sorry?
Not capital projects, like,
Only as it deals to ear handling. So you can do, ear handling includes doors, windows, air conditioning, HVAC type things. But we can't like pave roads or parking lots or add new buildings. It's very specific to that. Now, however, we're being very strategic and moving some of our operations, so we're saving some of our general fund money, putting in capital projects to do some other things.
correct.
Any additional questions for Mr. Wall?
That wasn't too bad. That was quick.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Well, we just got to make sure there's no other comments. So normally we would just open up briefly to see if there's any comments from the audience on the budget.
Park, you're safe.
I don't see any.
Okay, now we're done. Thank you.
Next item.
Board of Education business, acknowledgement of correspondence.
I think the board received various emails about some of the agenda and non-agenda items that we were talking about today. Anything else? Next.
Next item is board member committee and organizational reports.
Do we have any subcommittees meet since we were last together?
The superintendent evaluation, do we report on that, or?
Did we report?
We
Yeah,
did
all
not.
right. Go for it.
So, the entire board met in closed session for the superintendent evaluation, and we're happy to report that Dr. Glenn Maleko received a highly effective rating. So congratulations, Dr. Maleko, and a press release will follow.
Thank you. Appreciate it. If I could just say, I appreciate the support of the board, and thank you for leading the process, Trustee Moses. I find it very valuable to have that meeting where I get feedback, and our team is already working on it, and I want to thank our great team. It includes our executives who are here, but it's the entire staff. It's, the teachers that we talked about, it's everyone together. So I want to thank the board for their support. Appreciate it.
Next item.
Board member superintendent commentary.
One brief thing that I will say is that this is the last board meeting before the end of the school year, for our students at least. So to all of our graduates, we've already had 2 graduation ceremonies. We've got 4 more to go. Congratulations to all the graduates, and we look forward to seeing these graduating classes together for kind of the first time this year finally. Any other comments?
President Thorpe.
Trustee Moses.
Yeah, I would also like to congratulate the graduates and their families on accomplishing major milestones in their lives. It is time to celebrate and acknowledge the students' and family achievements despite the tough circumstances that we've had this year. However, while this celebration is deserved, it should not be at the expense of others. Our city had some horrific auto accidents in the last month, more than any other month of the year. And most of these accidents occurred due to high speeding, distracted driving, and some were serious and resulted in death and permanent disabilities. I ask of our students to always remind themselves, their peers, of the severe consequences of drag racing, and what could be the enjoyment and excitement for 1 or 2 minutes could result in a misery and sadness for the rest of their lives. I beg families to always have these difficult yet needed discussions with their teens when they start driving. I also ask parents to always remind their children of safe driving and consequences of distracted driving. Message or a video that you need to watch while driving can wait. Your life is more important, and that you mean so much to everyone around you. I also want to mention that municipal elections are upon us, and they're happening in less than 2 months. August 3rd is the primary, and there will be also two things on the ballot, I believe. One is to review the charter commission for the city, and the other one is for the library renewal millage. You may request your absentee ballot from the city clerk as early as later this month. So I encourage everybody to exercise their right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Trustee Watts?
I just wanted to follow up and say that as schools are starting to come out and let out, we're gonna see more children in the streets and riding their bikes. And I know what Trustee Moses was saying, that, you know, many times in the neighborhoods, we see some young drivers blowing through stop signs. So I say be mindful and conscious that sometimes you're gonna have kids on bikes and they may not stop at stop signs. And hopefully they do, because I've noticed a lot of cars that don't stop. So please be mindful of that so that we have a safe summer, a joyful summer. And I just want to thank all of the parents out there and the teachers and the support staff and everybody who's had quite a memorable year. But I just want to thank everybody, and congratulations to all the graduates for their last year. Thank you.
Next.
Request for information and/or for future agenda items.
Dr. Maliko.
I just wanted to make a comment that we have all the requests, even from last month, are up to date. They're in the document. So if you get a chance, take a look at information that was, several people requested.
Thank you.
Any requests for information or agenda items?
I would like to request item on student discipline, since the police was here today, and there was a mention of the student to prison pipeline, or school to prison pipeline, to just to see how many cases of our students' discipline end up with the police, and if there are any cases where they are penalized, just to see an overview from our high schools, I would say.
I would add an additional item, and I'm going to turn the request for information not from you, but from us. We talked about what we would like to see and possibly would not want to see in any agreement with the police. Please forward that over, I'd say let's forward it to Dr. Maliko. Things that we would want to see in any agreement, things that we would not like to see in any agreement, so we can start compiling it, so we can make sure that it's a document that we can be willing to your support of. Any other requests for information or future agenda items? All right, seeing none. Next item.
Next item is future meeting dates. Monday, June 14th, 2021, HFC meeting, 7 p.m. It will be here, right, at the Frank Franchi Boardroom, and virtually available, hfcc.edu/board-meeting-schedule on Monday, June 21st, 2021, P to 12 Board of Education meeting, 7 p.m. at the Administrative Service Center in the Frank Franchi Boardroom, and virtually available via the YouTube channel for the district, as well as the Facebook page and cable channel, Comcast Dearborn Channel 19 and WOW Channel 15. Monday, July 26th, 2021, P to 12 Board of Education meeting, 7 p.m. at the Administrative Service Center in the Frank Franchi Boardroom, and virtually available for viewing on the YouTube channel for the district, as well as the Facebook page and cable channel, Comcast Channel 19 and WOW Channel 15.
To all of our students and staff, we hope you enjoy your summer. Meeting is adjourned.